And we are live. This is Dark Journalist. It's great to be here with everyone. What a fantastic crowd already. And it's a major episode and a major subject tonight, which is why we're coming to you in this Thursday slot. Of course, tomorrow night we'll be back here with the X series. But tonight we have a very special episode on the secret space program and the developments there. And of course, as usual, I'm joined by the lovely Olivia.
Hi, everybody.
And she'll be taking your questions, so remember to ask them all in caps for the second half of the program. And I also want to mention something, which is there's this new thing going on where people are doing caps without a question. That doesn't work because we want the caps for the questions. So don't use caps if you're not asking a question. That's going to help us on our end. We have a fantastic show lined up for you with Clif, who's going to be here to tell us about a good number of things, but specifically about the secret space program and some of the shenanigans by some of the cults around the field, which I think is quite important for us to get into in such a week as this. Now, as you know, this program has been dedicated, and I've been dedicated to keep an eye on the developments about this marketing cult that has invaded the field over the course of the last couple of years. And tonight I have some very interesting things to tell you in relation to that and some of the major developments going on there. And of course, the group is headed by Corey Good, and it's called the Spirit Being Alliance. His manager is Roger Richards. His actual name is Roger Ramser Richards. And they have been kind of involved in a great many activities in the community that I've detailed in a series that I put together called New Age Deep State, which was 5 episodes of tracking how this was going forward with this group kind of getting involved in the conferences and getting involved in the narratives around the secret space program and how that's turned into a total disaster. And they had, really brought forward in the last week probably the biggest disaster in terms of their own activities. And I really want to put it on display that, 2 weeks ago, we came forward and tracked their program trying to trademark the term secret space program, which is unbelievably, the audacity of such a move. It's like trying to trademark UFO or something. I mean, it's a term for research. And so the marketing cult involved here doesn't seem to care about those rules. So anyway, we put together a campaign 2 weeks ago with like-minded individuals like Joe from the Carolinas, C.W. Chanter, and some other people who are just great. And there's too many to name, but we get into them as the show goes along here. The campaign was called No SSPTM. Hashtag on Twitter, and it became actually a trending hashtag on Twitter, which was quite remarkable considering anything around our community goes. Twitter doesn't usually pay much attention, but over the course of that time, the group said that they had the right to do this and that they were going to trademark it and everything was hunky-dory and all the rest of it. And we raised through people like Catherine Austin Fitz and Joseph Farrell, Richard Dolan. They all understood the threat to free speech, to free research of a group grabbing a trademark that they could then turn around and sell to some company that would lock it up, and that's the end of the research. It's a very dangerous maneuver, but it's the kind of thing we've seen from these guys over and over again. And frankly, after I'd done my initial 5 episodes on them last year, which was originally going to be 1 episode, but with their over-the-top response, shall we say, turned into 5 episodes. Isn't that fun? But when they came up with this, it's quite interesting because this is the kind of move, I think, that showed what they were after, which is a kind of monopoly around these things. And it wasn't going to happen. Now, I promised you 2 weeks ago that the no SSPTM was going to make it and that the SSP trademark would not stand. And now I'm happy to show to you here this document, which is directly from the United States Trademark Office. We get a look at it here, and I'll read it to you. And it says here in the statement that the applicant hereby expressly abandons the application for trademark registration made under the serial number identified above. The no SSPTM campaign coming through and giving us that edge and that public pressure to make these people, realize it was a bad idea and it was not a good marketing idea and it wasn't going to stand. And, an amazing, over 80% of the community stood up against it. It was quite remarkable. So everyone did a great job on that. So just when we thought, well, these guys are going to get some sense, and they're going to have the sense knocked back into them by the no SSPTM. Didn't work out that way, and I'm going to explain exactly what that rolled out as they started doxing critics and people who were contemplating or had left their cult. So this was a very serious situation, is why I give it so much serious attention. And it's around a very important area of research. The secret space program gets us into the Space Force. It gets us into the missing trillions. It gets us into that corridor of the black budget funding, where the money disappears, and disappears into what? Well, it's the privatization of space, of course. And that kind of nerve net that they're building, the global control grid, I think is something that comes into this picture also. So the secret space program research, which is something that we did a number of conferences on, starting in 2011, actually, Global BEM did their first one in Amsterdam. And so the absurdity of this group coming out and doing this. But as you're going to see, this group does not seem to know any bounds when it comes to ethics and the unethical lunges in this direction and then again in that direction. So, and very erratic action at the top. Now, some very significant members of the group have basically gotten out of there and resigned. And one of the most significant is Tracy Narrows, who has something called divine frequency. And when this SSPTM came up, she felt like it was a bridge too far, and it challenged her own ethics working with them. And that's where this tumble started, because she went on a few programs and discussed the fact that she was leaving the cult and why. And apparently they, in response, now turned very negative on her, which is very typical kind of Scientology tactics. But what's interesting is that they decided to dox the person who was interviewing her. It was a very popular show here in alternative media, and we know him quite well. And interestingly enough, they sort of put all this attention on him. Now, I'm very used to their kinds of attention because I've done specials on them, and they've sent me every kind of legal threat and otherwise for over a year, because that's just how they roll. And the more I've found out about them, the more I realize threats are just their MO. That's how they get what they want, and try to push people around. Of course, the buck stopped with me, because you're not going to be able to do that with me. But they tried it with Joe. And what I think is significant about this is, in essence, by docking this show and the host involved, the host is a healthcare worker and counsels cancer patients. And what they were doing was putting his clinic name and address there up for harassment from the crazy blue chicken fans. So this is such a low move that I thought, well, they went over the top in their organization, and we're going to hear something from them that's going to say this was too far. But instead, they doubled down on it and started praising this, and they created sock puppet accounts to promote it on Twitter, and took credit. Right, and took credit for it, putting it out there, saying, "Hey, look at this." And they used some of the Corey's kids, like Jordan Sather. So it's really quite despicable behavior, and we're not going to take it, frankly. So the same way that I promised you that the SSPTM would not stand 2 weeks ago, and it has not, it's gone, I'm also telling you that the doxing will not stand. And the good group, Sphere Being Alliance, Roger Ramser, all those people are going to be held accountable for this despicable action. But I want to go through that also, and the details and how we got there. One quick thing I want to mention is the secret space program is something on this show that we cover in tandem with the X series, because it formulates the very heart of the X series. Because when you're discussing that kind of money leaving the financial system and disappearing basically into space, we have to figure out what the corridor is. Now, in a number of episodes on the secret space program, I've pointed out that this really started under Kennedy, because Kennedy and McNamara, in a document that was put out in 2014 and declassified, identified a second space program that was going on that they couldn't get their hands on, and that they decided through NASA, and the program was originally called Blue Gemini. That's where we get the Blue Gemini program. But Blue Gemini had become such a strange mix of the military and civilian, and then this other thing, that they were creating this program and there was no accountability, but there were huge budgets for Blue Gemini that they were using. But there was some group right in between the defense contractors and NASA that were doing their own tests, and they were doing their own orbits, and Kennedy found this situation infuriating. Here he is with his defense secretary, Robert McNamara, here. What they did, and why this is so crucial to the secret space program and our understanding of it, is they decided to do something quite extraordinary. In a document put forward, they decided to say, we're going to take Blue Gemini, the program, from NASA and give it to the military, just in order to get their hands back on the power levers of space development. Now, this was the first skirmish over the secret space program that I found that there's a documentary trail for. So there's a long history of it. And one of the things I've pointed out is if we know anything about the continuity of government program, that came up as a result, and you can find most of this in Professor Peter Dale Scott's work over at Berkeley, who has been a great influence on me. We've done a number of shows together and had a number of discussions. But, you know, it's an interesting thing about Professor Scott. He does not go on the circuit. He does not promote very much, but his information is used over and over again. Now, what strikes me as interesting about this with Peter Dale Scott is Professor Scott identified that the continuity of government players always show up in these different environments. So, for example, when we had cases like Iran-Contra, or if we were going into 9/11, or even in the banks failing in 2008, there's always a member of this continuity of government program who shows up. In Iran-Contra, it was Oliver North who actually mentioned the program. Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney were the ones who were instructed to create it in the 80s. Of course, it had been originally created in the 50s, but it was far expanded under Reagan. And as we know, Rumsfeld became defense secretary for the second time under G.W. Bush, who was Bush second. And really what's interesting about that is Rumsfeld had been the defense secretary under Ford, and then he's coming back here some 25 years later to reprise the role. It's quite unusual. And so this is something that had been anticipated for a long time. Dick Cheney was there also and actually utilized the rules of continuity of government, which basically suspends the regular government and gives us an underground government. Well, somehow in this little battle, if we go back to the Kennedy part, he was seeing that this other government that had been set up in case of a nuclear strike, this underground government, continuity of government group, which is referred to as the Doomsday Network, they would be the titular head of the government if a nuclear strike had taken out the White House, for example. But that group decided that they could actually expand their powers because so much of what they did was classified. So there's a lot of black budget activity around these guys. And all the way from the Kennedy assassination through to recent events, we see this continuity of government players showing up over and over again, and those rules being exploited. Now, what they did with the secret space program is they took those same rules that they'd used for continuity of government to create this kind of underground secondary government, which think of it as a covert government. You have the overt government up here, which is the regular government that we know, Congress, the White House, and all that. And then you have this thing under there, which is classified, and nobody can get at it. It has intelligence, of course, written all over it, but it has these other players inside of that continuity of government structure. And because it's so secret and it relates to the continuity of government in the case of a nuclear emergency, it's very hard to for us to basically get any accountability. And a few times when that's tried, the people always get shut down. So it's only been raised twice, actually, in congressional hearings. It's quite unusual. So if you apply those rules now of continuity of government, which gives us this whole secondary feature in government, to space, if you say, well, the continuity of government now applies to space, then everything that you do in space is classified. Nobody down here has to know about it. How did the regular space program fall off the map in the early 70s? Just come back as these kind of secondary shuttle missions, most of them blowing up. It's quite unusual considering its original creation of the space program under JFK and moving forward. How did that go black? One central question. And how some 50 years later do we still not have a return trip to the moon and all the rest of it? Well, they realized they're going to have to solve this question, and that's why we have the Space Force talk now. That's why the secret space program research is crucial. And in the conferences I've done with Catherine Fitz and Linda Howe and Joseph Farrell, they've addressed it, and they were getting close and getting some answers. Well, oddly enough, so that gives us a picture of the real thing, how important it is. But oddly enough, this kind of weird version of it popped up a little bit after the conferences, 2015. And, we had the kind of like, I'm a galactic ambassador from the secret space fleet type wave. Now, these things happen from time to time, and you brush it off as entertainment or whatever, especially when people can't prove things. It seems like a fancy. And you learn in the alternative research community, that's just the way it goes, and you let them roll. But there was something very strange about this one. I remember being at the 2015 Secret Space Conference, and there was a unbelievable hubbub over having Corey Goode join it. And I was like, Corey Goode, a month ago, basically jumped on David Wilcock's show. And Corey Goode was from nowhere. He had worked largely in maintenance. And he didn't have any kind of resume that would assume there was no military background or anything. So for him to be associated with the secret space program was quite unusual. So it was David Wilcock, of course, who we know very well in this program, and we don't, we don't take any of those claims seriously about him being Edgar Casey or him knowing about Cabal RS or any of that kind of claptrap. You don't get that around here. But he did bring this forward, and it was all about Corey Goode and this blue chicken there back there. They called it Blue Avian, and this Blue Avian was giving him galactic ambassador instructions. This is what we got instead of Farrell and Fitz and Gary McKinnon and all this. We got this weird thing. So somewhere a marketing cult had devised that the topic was getting hot and that they needed to do something to kind of keep up with it. And so they rolled this guy out, and it was, the instrument was David Wilcock through Gaia TV. Now, as Wilcock revealed in a recent letter that he put out saying that he was leaving Gaia TV, when in fact they were getting rid of him. It was one of those I'm going to quit before I'm fired situations. He expressed in the letter, which I have here and I will read, that basically, he was promised a finder's fee for these new whistleblowers, assuming he'd gotten a finder's fee. So the idea is you get somebody out there, the taller the tale they tell, the more far out they can go. You get your ratings and you get a finder's fee. That's basically that was the level of ethics that it was on. And it was an entertainment program. And as I said, okay, those things, if that's the way they want to play it, fine. This kind of flimsy entertainment version of the real thing, I guess you live with it. But strange things started to happen. As I said, suddenly there were weird groups popping up everywhere, demanding things about Goode. Later, I found out from some of the people who had dealt with this, including Groovy Bean, who's in the chat tonight. Hello, Groovy Bean. Who had worked for Full Disclosure Now and was around all these people, Goode and Ramsar, and didn't like what she saw, basically, and paid a price, really, from them for getting out of there. But one of the things that she noticed was this group called SBA Task Force, which was like a Facebook group that if you complained or something, or if you said, hey, this guy doesn't sit right with me, this guy in Blue Chicken and a Blue Chicken Co., they would come on and swarm you with all this negative stuff, oh, you're Illuminati cabal or whatever it is, whatever crazy idea they had that day, and, whatever meds they had gone off of the day before. So this was the Blue Chicken again, the Blue Avian commander, and he was giving them, serious counsel and all this kind of thing. Now, there's a funny story about this picture, too, which I will get into. Now, Goode went on to famously go after people who had defected from the organization. And that's where my series came from, because some of those people came to me and said, some things going on over there that even for the alternative research, like, it's pretty bad. You got to check into it. And I spent a lot of time and a lot of research figuring out who these people were. And the further back I went with them, as I pointed out on the last show, Goode, just before he had done this, was under a restraining order that is for life. And I think that this is very important, that a judge deemed Corey Goode dangerous to his former employer, who he was harassing, who had fired him after 7 weeks. Took him to court and then basically pretended that they had broken into his house and, left a knife through a magazine and I mean, there's some weird fantasies going on here. So I have affidavits here, which I read last time, so I won't go too far into them, but that case is there at Dallas County. And, it's interesting that that's there as a public thing. And the plaintiff is James Corey Good. Darling International is the case. The cause number is DC 14-04807. That's a public document. Anybody can get their hands on it. And basically, Darling International was looking for the courts to protect them from Corey Good because of the crazy threats that they were getting from him, and him saying that they were trying to do all this stuff to him, break into his house and, make him a target and all this stuff. So the judge basically, by saying none of that ever happened, ruled it as a fantasy. It's kind of important. And I think the people at Gaia TV, et cetera, and David Wilcox shirked a gigantic responsibility, which we're all picking up the slack for, because they wouldn't get off their butts and do any real research, or they didn't want to because, hey, let's sell a blue chicken fantasy to some people. Well, before we're done with tonight, you're going to see it was all just a fantasy, basically. And joining us at 8 o'clock is going to be Clif High, and he's going to bring his great expertise in dealing with them, because there's some really interesting things that happened along the IP front there. I'm going to remind everyone that you're watching Dark Journalist. It's fantastic to be here. This is a huge crowd. Miss Olivia, how are we doing over there?
We are doing great. Everybody is pretty much polite.
They're wrapped with attention, is that what you're saying?
Well, no, some people would like to curse, and I don't blame them, but we're going to try to keep it clean.
I know that you put up The Bird there by Morris Day and the Time, a great retro track that's just going to get us through the entire evening. While I'm thinking about it, make sure everyone go to darkjournalist.com, sign up for the newsletter with the incredible and just unprecedented crackdown on social media that's been going on. Quite remarkable, I would say. And when you look at it in depth, you can see the only way we're going to stay in touch is if you're on the newsletter. So that's a free newsletter. You'll get it once a week. It'll let you know what shows are coming up. And get behind the show, support the show, do those things to make it count, because right now it's crucial, I would say, especially in light of the election. We have a lot of crazy news going on with the firing of Attorney General Sessions and his replacement. And it's going to be a different era, so we're going to need to be at our very best to keep up with the Trump administration and all the very interesting developments there, working with the Democratic Congress. Okay, back to the story at hand. I want to point out something about how lies don't mean anything to these people that are in the marketing cult. Corey Good, Roger Richards, anyone associated at that level. They don't seem to think that the public can see that they're lying, or there's some weird disconnect. And, I've given up trying to figure out exactly why they would lie so blatantly in the public, but I want to show a really good example of this. All right, so during the trademark hassle, where they tried to trademark the secret space program, and we had the No SSPTM campaign, Catherine Austin Fitts, Richard Dolan, so many people, Joe from the Carolinas. I mean, everybody was on this one. We weren't going to let it stand, and we didn't. We've got the paper. But when Corey Good backed down, he, just before he backed down, he put this tweet out, which I want to show to everybody. This is verifiable, too, so, with Good, you don't have to trump up any of his documents, because he says the craziest things. So this is Corey Good's Twitter account, and he says, "Have made it clear several times in multiple posts that are ignored. Those circulating the claims that I am trademarking the word secret space program are doing so out of ignorance or intentional spreading of disinfo." Okay, that's good. Trying to convince us that he's not trademarking the word just before he withdrew. Quite interesting if you think about it. Well, I'll tell you what, the trademark office disagrees with you. Okay, let's find out why. Okay, first of all, here's your SSP 878-21483 application, okay? What is the name of the mark? It says SSP there, right? What is the mark here? What does it say? Secret Space Program. Do you see it? So let's go back to Corey's thing. This is his application. Good. This is your application. Secret Space Program is what it says. What did you say? Mr. Good, you said, "I've made it clear several times and multiple posts that are ignored, multiple posts, those circulating the claims that I am trademarking the word secret space program are doing so out of ignorance or intentional spreading of disinfo. Corey Good, you're a liar. Your own trademark application shows right here the secret space program. That's your application. You're a liar. So let's start with that. So Good will do anything to kind of gain public face, and he will lie bald-facedly, as we just saw him lie here. What are all these lies about? What are this marketing cult doing in the alternative research field? What's really happening here? Blue chickens? Blue aliens? Rolling guys out with restraining orders on them? Collecting money in the background? Taking channels down? They went after my channel so many times I can't count it. It's hard to take my channel down. But they'll try it with this video, I'm sure, also. So they have to control the narrative. They have to control these pieces. But how did we get a cult operating in full bald face and now doxing people? How did it happen? Well, let's answer the question. Good became part of a system through Gaia TV, through David Wilcock, of rolling these people out, telling these wild stories. Then having conferences and shows support that. And then shows like Jimmy Church, etc., coast to coast, promoting the hoax. Now, I will say this in Church's defense, and it's quite a wild story because I pointed it out on Twitter, and I included him in the tweet. And he did. He said doxing was wrong. And guess who was the first person who went after him? It was Corey Good. Well, see, it's tricky to make friends with the circus here because the circus likes to keep control. And if you're not with them, you're part of the cabal, the evil Dark Alliance cabal. That's the way cults roll. Now, they're a small-scale version of larger cults that we've seen, but their impact in the small arena has been very disastrous and very destructive. And it has to be addressed by the people within the arena of the alternative field. Because when they go around doxing healthcare workers, you know, it's one thing to get off on calling your enemies Illuminati. What did they call me, Olivia? I've got vampire eyes.
Oh, right.
I've got
with those fake fangs.
and fangs. I've got I'm a CIA agent. I'm an Illuminati. I'm
the new thing is the Air Force thing. I don't know
the
what
Air
that's
Force.
About.
Yeah, that's a biggie. Love child of James Comey, Rothschild, and Hillary Clinton. How did they all three? Well, I don't even want to think about that. But this is how they roll. And so when we take a really good look at what they do, there's a kind of weird thing they're trying to do that I've noticed, which is like they're trying to militarize New Age thinkers. So they get a guy like Wilcock who's big in the New Age, and he starts talking about weapons and alliances and stuff. It's weird. And all these New Agers who are like thinking about raising their consciousness and stuff, suddenly they're thinking about, yeah, we're going to annihilate, you know. So there's a warlike mentality that creeps in. Where it becomes pernicious is when they get challenged. And as with any psychopath, this is always true, but with any cult in particular, they always target that. So when we had a cult defector, as I pointed out with Teresa Yaneros a couple of weeks ago, she said, I'm out of here. The secret space program trademark is a bridge too far. And she left. And immediately they went after her and said, well, you know, you're a plagiarist, right? Suddenly, I guess they found all of these ethics that they didn't have a couple of years ago, and they relied on her to do their PR. But in fact, that was another one of these kind of fake things that they threw around. Yes.
Okay, I want to throw out a question right now. VC77 wants to know, why do we care if they are fake? They will disappear.
Well, no. In fact, it's quite important to deal with a cult because as they grow, they metastasize and they become more and more dangerous. And they monopolize real research. And as we can see in the case of the secret space program trademark, they become a very destructive force. And they can be a tool for other corporate forces that want to lock down this type of research. And this could become, research by trademark war, wrapping us up in courts for years and years about getting at the heart of this research, which we know here on this program is crucial. Let's take a look at this docs, because I think it's quite important. Now, Good basically was paying attention to these accounts that had just been started when the Secret Space Program trademark campaign had started. This was, one of the accounts was Thomas Crown, which was a fake name. And they put this up doxing this popular host in alternative media and showing that he was actually a psychiatrist and was counseling cancer patients, and doing quite a good job of that, by the way. But what they did, as we can see here, is Good says, people accuse you of that which they do. Citizens, journalists, digging and sharing finding, trolls, dox and lie, but freak out. Okay, now Good just has terrible grammar, but we're going to get through it. Any of their own alleged secrets coming out. Why isn't their past relevant to the argument? Motives and lack of ethics are clear. Dark Alliance revelations. I want to point this out. Dark Alliance is something that David Wilcock came up with last year to save Corey Good. There was a Dark Alliance after him, which basically amounted to, me and a couple other people. So here's the Dark Alliance. Dark Alliance is the name of a real book by Gary Webb, and it was all about the Contra CIA cocaine connection. Webb was a brave journalist that the deep state assassinated, and had a lot of honor in the work that he did. But to these guys, he's just an IP tag to pick up. So Wilcock likes to tag things. He's like, I know, I'll create a Dark Alliance that cut my brakes and then is after Corey Good. And this is what we get. This is the kind of low mentality that we get from people like Wilcock, who also say, oh, I'm reincarnated Edgar Casey. No, you're not. Okay, let's deal with reality. And interestingly enough, of course, Casey would never use tricks like that. I mean, stealing somebody else's honor, it's beyond the beyond. Hey, I didn't even realize this, Olivia. Check it out. The quote on the corner here is, gripping, richly researched and documented Peter Dale Scott.
Oh,
isn't that funny?
didn't know that either.
Go Professor Scott. He's in the heart of everything. The book, by the way, the real book, Dark Alliance, is a fantastic work. What Good and Wilcock tried to do was create a phony group that they could turn their followers against so they wouldn't be exposed for unleashing the blue chicken cult on everyone. Now, they had financial reasons for doing that, but they had other reasons also, which is that after perpetrating this hoax on the community, then, they needed to get out of it. And the only way to get out of it was to make a boogeyman. And their boogeyman was the Dark Alliance. And I was their boogeyman for a while. They got sick of me and they went after Joe. That was their big mistake. See, I'm kind of used to it with you guys. And in some ways, it's sort of like, if a day goes by where you don't make up something about me and someone's like, wow, what happened? Hey, you mean I'm not an Air Force astronaut? What's going on here? All right, but let's look at some of the more pernicious sides of this, because after Good did this and doxed this individual, and by the way, doxing is illegal in all 50 states, and basically it is defined as releasing private information as a form of punishment or revenge, and private information including social security numbers, addresses, workplaces, things like that, things that are very unprofessional. And what's fascinating is here's Good not only promoting this, but actually coming out and saying, hey, let's have more of this. Citizens, journalists, let's get some doxing going. Dark Alliance revelations. He wants to be bailed out by David Wilcock's fantasy from last summer. Well, this is 2018. That fantasy isn't going to fly. And neither of the blue chickens, unfortunately, as you're going to learn. Now, by doing this, he actually put a number of cancer patients at risk. He put a cancer ward in the target lines to save his weird fantasy. And it's beyond, I can't even believe I have to discuss this. It's such a horrible thing to do. And then, I felt like maybe if they felt it went too far and they were contrite or apologize, nothing. These people are more arrogant than ever, and they're actually encouraging more. And they decided to take another host here. And by the way, these are the guys we're talking about. I'm sure they're going to take this video down. So you have my permission when this video is down to download it yourself, put it up, spread the word. because this is the information that needs to get out. The time has come. This is just too much. You know, you're not going to dox people who are working with cancer patients. Not on my watch. Okay, so the cult is over. It's exposed. Get used to it. Get a real job. All right, so that's one of the Corey's kids here with Corey and Justin Deschamps, who runs Stillness in the Storm. And a brave guy over here, Justin Deschamps, he comes forward during the trademark thing, and I was thinking, he's come to his senses. He's going to say, hey, Good shouldn't trademark this. No, he's doubling down now, and he's saying, like, oh, it's a great thing that you try to trademark this. And, like, he's writing articles trying to support Corey's being like, he's supposed to trademark Secret Space Program. So with people like that around, no wonder the cult never gets any sensibility. All right, Jordan Sather, he was the Corey's kid that they got from a health food store, and they decided we need to hit somebody with the youth demographic. Now, interestingly enough, he was friends, and Groovy Bean, I don't think will mind me saying this, which is that she was basically kind of like a mother figure for him, and she gave him advice and stuff like that. And she was working with Roger, and full disclosure now at the time, because she thought, hey, they're going to do something good in the community. She learned later on that their intentions were exactly the opposite. And she got out of there. And so, she explained the story to me. Now, what's fascinating about this is that, say there used to be a kid who walked around with a whiteboard and made some things. Maybe he was into David Wilcock, but who cares? Now he's just a raving, like, I don't even know what to call this kid. And it's all under the influence of Corey Good and the gang. So let's look at this. Here he is promoting. I cannot even believe I have to say this. Here he is promoting the doxing of the psychology doctor working with cancer patients. I mean, what have you come to? Is a YouTube channel or Patreon worth that? So anyway, what he says is, it looks like Joe from the Carolina, one of the individuals in the smear campaign against myself and others. You want to explain that? Also against QAnon. I'll just throw that in, just hoping to get some Q people mad. Is actually a psychology doctor with a criminal record. Well, no, he doesn't have a criminal record. You guys made that up. And yes, he is a psychology doctor, and he works with cancer patients. Maybe you should go back to school and do something good for people yourself, and stop being an idiot online and doxing people and preventing cancer patients from getting good aid. Nobody is going to like this. It's despicable, and you should be a man and grow up, finally. Get out of the thumb of Roger Ramser, Richards, and Corey Good, and be a man. Now, what he says at the end is, these journalists, in quotes, are hiding behind fake names and aliases, controlled opposition as I dox my life away. And what's great is it's a little dose there on the bottom. He says, you have it backwards, Rich Dolan in Solari Report. Yeah, it's Catherine Austin Fitz that you're talking to there, Junior. Accusing Corey of being a fraud when the people you're associating with are fakes. Yeah, you really, so you with your, health food cash register that Roger Ramser grabs and pretends knows about the space program and knows about Q and all this junk, you're going to take on Richard Dolan and Catherine Austin Fitz and call them trolls.
Like he knows better.
I mean, it's pretty humiliating. But the docs, for him to do the docs, Corey, off balance individual, I've seen him do weird doxing things. This kid promoting this kind of filth is unbelievable. It just goes beyond the pale. I mean, I don't even know what to say. Okay, now one of their sock puppet accounts that they always link to. Now this account just started in October 19th when we started up with the No SSPTM campaign. So they just created this thing, and they always link off to it so they can say, oh, that guy did it. Well, it's a pretty easy routine to bust on Twitter. It's called a burner account or a sock puppet account. Comprende there, Senor Good? Let's try this. Okay, so now another person that they're doxing here is C.W. Chanter. Now, Chanter had already let out his real name anyway. Chanter is a lawyer, and he does his YouTube show on the side. But here they are showing Chanter and his dad, his father, who's a man in his 80s. Okay? This is the kind of sick level that the marketing cult of Roger Richards Ramser and Corey Good have sunk to. So it says attorney, real name Zabodnik, blah, 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 Benjamin, a.k.a. C.W. Chanter. And then they say, drunken, slanderous, cyber-stalking threats. Oh, posted under alias on YouTube. Yeah, like Organa Alderaan is your real name. I think Princess Leia is calling TM suit. I can feel it. So they show these pictures down here, and I'm not going to show them, but you know, of this lawyer with his dad, an 80-year-old man. I mean, you're going to dox an old man? Is that really? Is the blue chicken story really? Is it worth doxing cancer counselors and old men? I mean, take a look at yourself in the mirror. What has happened to you? You can talk about blue chickens till the blue chickens come out. But this is sick. You're a sick individual. This is your response when even Jimmy Church, who has really supported you guys, and I don't know much about Jimmy Church, I'll be honest with you. I've listened to his show twice. Why he would ever support you guys, I don't know. But even Jimmy wasn't going to put up with this. And he said, no doxing, and I'll find his. But anyway, I'm going to read you the response. This is Corey Good to Jimmy Church. No complaints with same Dark Alliance slander libel. Here's Dark Alliance again, right? Gary Webb's book that they're ripping off the title to. See, it's always IP theft. They can't think of a real original idea, except the blue chickens, which we found out is from Star Trek. But hey, character assassinated and doxed me. Double standard. People can get in trouble doxing. Be warned. So you're threatening the host now of the show that's been promoting you. I mean, what's going on in there? Oh, you know, how many unstable comments from a cult leader do you need to show this is really a dangerous situation? So be warned, huh? Why? That's a threat, dude. Be warned. Why? Because you're going to do something? What are you going to do? Fly a blue chicken over here? Are you going to threaten Jimmy Church because he doesn't want you doxing people in the community, or me or Joe? You're going to threaten us? I don't think so. I think your goose is cooked. All right. So the next day, backing off a little, Jordan Sather goes, next fun rumor going around about me is that I illegally doxed a healthcare worker. False. I shared publicly available info that someone else posted. Yeah, your little sock puppet account about an individual who uses a fake alias on the internet. So you just, in fact, admitted, dude, that you're a doxer because you said you posted the information publicly. Thank you. Is self-defense a crime? Doxing is a crime, and you did it. I hope somebody takes you aside and explains to you the legality of doing that, because it would be an unfortunate thing for someone your age to land in a pen. Okay? Now, Tracy Narrows, who came up at the same time in the Corey Good situation with Jordan, you can see who's trapped in the cult and who got out in this tweet, where she points out, hey, Jordan Sather is denying doxing a healthcare professional for disagreeing with him on something. Why did you do it then, Jordan? Good point. You see what happens when somebody learns from being around these people? And what does Jordan Sather respond with? Nope. Yeah, okay. Yeah, let's try that again. A really good response. Nope. That's a problem. This is a real problem. But there's your former buddy there. Started with good when you did. She's got a much brighter future than you have coming. I can tell you that. So a little more with good. And we have to go through these tweets to really show the impact. And I know tonight's show is serious, but then again, so is doxing. And we are joined by Mr. Clif. Hi. Clif, it's great to see you. Can't hear you yet.
There we go.
Hey, fantastic. Clif, how are you?
Doing fine.
Clif,
My dogs are down here saying, do we smell roast chicken?
Yeah, I think they might. I think they just might. It's great to have you on here. Clif, this is the first time you've been a guest. You know, we've talked many times, but you haven't been a guest on the show, and so it's exciting to have you here.
Well, thank you very much. It's a interesting subject, and I'm very saddened that we have to discuss it.
I am too, and you know, it's interesting because I was talking with Olivia about this, which is last year when we did our show on New Age Deep State on the good cult. We hadn't done anything about them since then until the trademark nonsense came up, and they came all back again. It was like over a year later. And then even after the trademark thing, I was keeping an eye on them, but we had no plans to do anything about them. And then this, I mean, these guys.
I know, it's sad. It's sad.
Yeah.
I mean, now I have some justification as well as an insider. I've got an insider leaking me information, and you know that I do, because you know who I'm referring to.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And a legitimate person there. But so now we know some of the history that's been obscured, that we've been trying to figure out basically what the hell happened. Why are they doubling down on stupid, right?
Yes, yes. And we're getting real good indications about why this is happening. And what's fascinating about you, Cliff, is I want to say that when this was happening last year, and I took on the project of doing the New Age Deep State, a lot of people were like, I don't want to deal with the cult because, they're nasty people. But you had encountered a number of things with them corrupting the data for the reports, the Alta reports that you were putting together at the time, which is an incredible database of work that you've put together, which so many people looked forward to. Can you just tell me a little bit about what happened?
It was actually the year before. Well, it was 18 months before that that I became aware that the data was being corrupted. And basically, I do web scraping, which is even used to build web stores now, that kind of thing. But you just scrape words off and you put them into a database. My unique aspect of this was this thing I called an emotional reduction engine, where I was able to take words and apply quantifiers that told me about the use of that word within that context at an emotional level that had been quantified by a number. And I was constantly tuning my lexicon. I had to do it every run because language changes fast, especially within context.
Right.
You get a whole new context and a new word literally from one month to the next, and it has all these huge levels of import to it that you have to quantify in order for my system to work. And I became aware after some period of time of wrestling with a number of what appeared to be a systemic level of corruption that I had initially put down as a bug within my processing software, but that actually turned out to be a breakdown in my filtering process to keep fantasy work out of my database. Okay, so my database, my web scraping knows when it's at a movie site dealing with movies. It knows when it's at a game site and dealing with plot lines on games and so on. So I can differentiate in this kind of a deal. And I was basically excluding everything from the UFO world, especially the conferences and anything relating to channeling. And yet I started getting leak through, for a better word, that I couldn't place anywhere because my filters were pretty tight. And then I discovered that the filters were fine. They just weren't being applied to a particular set of contexts that were coming out of Hollywood. Okay, not creative Hollywood, but business Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it snuck in. And because the language was being picked up by a lot of people that would go to like Contact in the Desert or whatever, and they were within this small group of individuals with high profile accounts where they did a lot of writing back and forth that my system would sweep, and they were basically parroting out their thoughts on the Corey Good kind of story in an area that had no context in which that material was appropriate. And you could imagine this might be a high-placed casting assistant talking to somebody who builds sets.
So we're talking about
kind
entertainment, basically. It's the entertainment.
Exactly. Correct. Now, I have many filters pointing at the entertainment industry because of gaming and all of the movie plot lines that end up online and fan pages and all of this. It's a very rich area for prescient language because it is within our imagination that we tap closest to the psychic and pull that in, and that prescient language is what I'm trying to mine. But there's all kinds of stuff, and it's like panning gold. You throw out 9 tons of rock in order to get a gram of gold. And that was what I was trying to do with these language sets and these filters. But it never dawned on me to screen this out within the context of business discussions. And that's the area that it sort of crept in. And I didn't know, to be honest, the extent of the push that this gang of this chicken gang had done in order to obtain the audience that they had. So it rose very suddenly, more suddenly than my data sets were prepared to reveal to me. So it came in and it polluted the data set. So I got very upset.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
actually I sort of determined that something was going on, but I didn't have any culprits. And so I had to set some traps.
Yes, and you set some traps. One of the traps you set when I was following, which is absolutely fascinating, was related to Antarctica, and which was right around the time that this marketing cult was using Antarctica as this kind of central pivot around all these other things, because it's a real Antarctica story about discoveries, and Joseph Farrell had been doing blogs about all these high-profile visitors to Antarctica, and then this weird kind of circusy fantasy version came up.
Right, and what I'd done with my Antarctica material, which was a legitimate meme or a legitimate context within my larger framework that was called Space Goat Farts, which is where I put all the things that were undetermined, officially denied, all of these kind of things, rumors and all of those, but may still be useful.
Yes.
And there was a lot of Antarctica language in there. And so I noticed that the pollution seemed to be a circuitous loop, or a circuitous reference to my own work. And so I thought, was this happening? Now, the very first time I did one of these public runs, way back in 2001, prior to 9/11, I did one of these that forecast 9/11. And within like a month and a half, all of my data sets were polluted by all the language I had put out.
Wow.
And so I had to start building filters and this thing I called MOM, which was model of model space, in which I would put my own words for cross comparison against the data sets to eliminate them. And so it started getting, I actually started thinking that, it's one of these references to my own work, and okay, where's it coming from? But it's not quite that way. Some of the language was off, some of the emotional quantifiers were down, so it was not easily found. And what really pissed me off was I spent probably the good part of 6 months trying to locate this. And in the course of that 6 months, I performed 3 experiments within the language, where I would put something in not altering the nature of the prescient language, just the arrangement of the words in very specific linguistic references that were very unusual. Okay, you just wouldn't see these 4 words usually within English combined in just this particular way. And I did that 3 times, and then there was a time delay, and it came back to me. And I discovered later what the time delay was. And this is how it worked in my understanding of it.
Okay.
I would write this stuff. It would be eaten up by the blue chicken cult, and then it would be regurgitated during the next taping cycle, which may be some number of months from the time I actually wrote the material. And so I noticed that there was this time lag, and then by shifting my experiment out in time, I was able to get it closer to the production cycle so that it showed up within that next cycle. And I said, aha, bastard found.
That's great. Well, it's interesting because this kind of IP theft is something that we've seen over and over again. I did one episode which was called The Art of the Steal, which featured you also, along with Linda Moulton Howe and Joseph Farrell and other people, artists, etc. And that's where we noticed this trend of them just grabbing these things and then it becoming regurgitated through their own weird stuff. So there's a little time lag. Some writers work on it, tailor it around this guy's story. His original story wanders out of nowhere. I'm this maintenance guy and I was part of the secret space program. I don't have a military history, but trust me anyway. And then what happens after that is his story gets more and more elaborate and all these other things. And then David Wilcock's kind of egging him on. And we know that he was talking about getting a finder's fee through Gaia for this. So there's incentive there to get this guy to talk really crazy. And then this guy's going off. He's a galactic ambassador. He's going to Antarctica. He's got red dust from Mars on his boots.
I didn't know about that. I knew about the time that he had faked the 3 divots in the backyard so he could tell his wife that the spaceship had picked him up that previous night.
Yes, yes.
And there was the evidence.
Yeah,
I knew about that one, but no, I didn't know about the red dust from Mars.
Yeah. And the red dot on his chest, which is, I'm avoiding a laser gun. But the story was getting more and more elaborate, and it was like, oh yeah, I just got picked up in a blue orb, and I hit Antarctica and then Mars. Now I'm back, and there were all these galactic people there, and there was a 14-foot reptilian, and just before he assassinated me, 2 avians came in and boom, you know.
Yeah.
So the story got really over and over the top. And but that is interesting, this idea of these groups working on it. And that's where the marketing cult comes in, because the marketing cult, and I want to explain this to people, they apply a grid over the whole space. And they say, here's this grid. People are interested in Antarctica. They're interested in Q. They're interested in UFOs. They're interested in Catherine Austin Fitzberg, you know, and then they lay that grid over and figure out how they can categorize them into these other tabs that they put down. That's how a marketing company works. And we see so much of that around the blue chicken cult. And what's interesting is that since the summer, of course, they don't have the support of Gaia. So it's a much more raw situation. It's much easier to see. And I think that's where we get some of this bizarre behavior.
So going back to some of my insider information here,
Yes.
We know now that sometime in very early 2018, Jay Weidner left Gaia for reasons of his own. Okay.
And he was a producer there who produced Cosmic Disclosure.
Okay, and see, there's the rub. Jay is more than you, or people misunderstand the role of a producer, perhaps. I think that's really it, okay? Because Jay Weidner is the epitome of a producer, because he's able to tie everything together. He sits in the middle of it, and he handles the problems, makes the decisions, comes up with the solutions, sees that it's done. All of these tasks to a level of efficiency and artfulness that many fail to appreciate. Another thing that he does is that he stands between all the creative people and their support staff in terms of logistics, and the people that get towels into the restrooms, even all of this kind of stuff. He stands between them and management,
right.
and especially the creative people. And unfortunately, we would have to put David Wilcock and Corey Goode into that category. And in my understanding, when Jay left, the brains walked out of the room and they were left with their native chicken intelligence.
Yes.
And it did not serve them well, especially in dealing with management. And that's where things started to fall apart. And that's where the story gets a little odd, okay? Or not odd, because it's somewhat predictable. But it takes these divergent little side paths and subplots for a bit. And so we see that the brains walk out of the room, and we get other people from within the gang. I don't like calling them a cult anymore, because they're actually using gang tactics here, which we can go into in a minute. But so the gang decides that they're going to try and fill this power vacuum that's suddenly been created. Bear in mind that the producer is the power, and management, to a great extent, is beholden to a very artful producer, because they know they cannot replicate what that individual does, right? Management is management in terms of their thinking. They can manage money, but they know they're no good at managing, or they should know they're no good at managing the creative and the rest of it. And so there was a power vacuum created. The chicken intelligences stepped in and did a very bad job in estimating where they stood in this power relationship, and they caused it to go all to hell. And that would be a very broad brush as to what happened over, say, February and March and so on. In that period of time, because of things that were going on at Gaia and certain things that were said to Corey Goode and David Wilcock, they got the idea of following their betters, so to speak, and initiating the trademark effort.
This is where the trademark push came from.
Right. It wasn't their idea. They thought it was going to be a battle of trademarks with Gaia. And that got them into because they realized, at some point there, they realized that they were being cast adrift, and that without Jay, they had no real good conduit into management in such a way that things could be smoothed over from their initial mistakes made, overestimating their power position.
Yes. Okay, I got it. That's a good picture, actually, because everything went very bizarre for them, including them leaving. And then Gaia TV picks up these new guys, Jason Rice and all the rest of it, and they freak out, and they send, Goode sends legal letters to Jason Rice saying you can't use SSP, which is how we even found out that they had trademarked it in the first place. So that's very interesting though, because so they're kind of replaced there. They made this push, and then management says to them, "You're out of here."
And to some extent, that was acrimonious in terms of when management said you're out of here. It's very much like the previous situation with Corey Good's previous employer, where you're out of here and good riddance.
Yes.
Now, from the viewpoint of both parties, though, I suspect that they were already in contention because they were running around trying to out trademark each other over intellectual property that they each thought that they owned, that everybody thought that Corey Good had created instead of actually stealing.
Yes, that's an excellent point, actually. So the trademark wars began in earnest there, and then they spilled over into the fall.
They didn't manifest until that next season, when we see Jason Rice, bearing in mind there's some number of months before the airing of that it was actually done. It was done with Jay Whitener back in Gaia at that time. So we're looking at way back in winter. And then we see it the next fall in this kind of like seasonal approach to these airings. And it was during that period of time that we get to where, for whatever bizarre reason, I can't think of the intent. All of a sudden, David Wilcock has a Luciferian fly up his butt about Gaia, and goes to some lengths to say so.
Right, he's been there 6 years. He's never noticed that their management is
Never mind the pentagrams on the wall and the blood on the floor and the black candles everywhere.
Checks are signed in blood. You should have got
right. Should have got a hint. So things are just squirrely in the UFO world already, and then it's getting even stranger because now the gang is out on their own. Okay, they don't have the deep.
Yes.
No more deep pockets, no more paychecks coming in. They've got to do something. They're still a collective. They've still got their hooks into all of these people for whatever reason in one way or another. And so they decide to try and pull off another collective effort. But again, as I point out, the brains had walked out of the room, and they're left with their native chicken intelligence, and we're left, all of the rest of us, in having to go, oh my God, above majestic.
Oh my God. This is that just unbelievable. And what's interesting to me about all that is the strange push where they shove this stuff out and they're trying to take this position, and instead, they piss everyone off with the trademark war, including people who really had given them a pass on a number of things. And then they land into doxing land when one of their own defects, which is Tracy Naros, leaves, and then boom, they start to freak out all of a sudden, and they go after the hosts, and the host that we started the show off with, the healthcare worker, and suddenly their strategy is to dox everyone. They doxed C.W. Chanter.
Yeah, and I'm going to actually save them some trouble here. My real name, I'm going to finally reveal it to all and sundry. My real name is Clif High. Okay, so anyway, though, something about that is that.
Are you sure that High doesn't mean High Priest of the Dark?
No, and I can get into it if you really want to talk about it. Let's talk lineage. It's actually from the German Hoch. My father's people were German English. Anyway, though, Teresa and the doxing and so on. All right. Okay. So this is typical gangland behavior. All right. And so this is where I started thinking, all right, this is not a marketing cult. These are people that if you met them at a street fair, working a street fair in a neighborhood in Brooklyn, you'd say, oh, that's the neighborhood wise guys, right? They're enforcing who may not attend these fairs. They're trying to take a percentage of everything that goes on. They're trying to own it, even though they don't own it. They're muscling in on the owners. There's a lot of exclusionary tactics. And then anybody that gives them any heat, they stomp on as rapidly as they can. These are very.
So this is the thug. It's thug technique.
It's thug life. Yeah. And it reminds me so much of what I had seen in my youth, living in a very much different South in the 50s, where the federal government finally was called in to deal with a lot of local thuggery that went from local all the way up into the state houses in Georgia, South Carolina, et cetera, Virginia. Right. And it was with the and they brought in their weapon, which was the RICO Act, which is the racketeering and organized crime laws. And if you look at what this gang is doing, a lot of their activity could be easily seen by a prosecutor and easily presented by a prosecutor as violations of the RICO Act.
It falls under the RICO. I totally agree with that, because it's intimidation, it's bullying, and it's threats.
It's a protection racket. Exactly.
Yeah, it's a protection
racket. Guy, you do what we want, or hey, something might happen to your booth,
You just might wind up in some trouble along the way if you don't.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, that's fascinating. And I want to say, I do notice, Miss Olivia, that we have Joseph Farrell in the audience.
We do indeed.
It's great to see you out there, Joseph. I want to remind everyone, you're watching Dark Journalist. We're joined by the incredible Clif. We've been meaning to have Clif on the show, and this is a perfect opportunity. We are talking about a tough subject tonight because a number of people in the community got doxxed by the Blue Chicken Gang of Corey Good, the Sphere Being Alliance people who, I've called a marketing cult, but I think that Clif is telling us they've updated their tactics now. They're the gang. And so let's talk a little more about the gang. At this point, with that kind of a move, like I have my own idea about this, but coming from you, I think you understand these things on such a deep level. What do they hope to gain by, say, doxing somebody like Joe, for example?
They just want to keep it quiet, and they want to quash any, at this particular time, their goal is to simply eliminate hassles, right? Eliminate anybody that's going to point the finger at them, anybody that's going to question their authority within the situation, anybody that questions Corey Good's authority to say who was in the space program and who wasn't, who can speak, who wasn't, all of this kind of thing. They're directly, and he states repeatedly, I'm the authority as to who was there and who wasn't. I was the galactic ambassador. I'll say who can speak and who's LARPing.
Yes.
And so now I don't have a headache any longer, but I actually did today listen to David Wilcock on Jimmy Church yesterday.
Oh my God.
All right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it went beyond my usual 28 minutes. That's the longest I'd ever been able to listen to him before. But I listened to a lot of his language, and placed in the context of the RICO Act, what we have here is Jimmy Church actually telling people in his radio show why we can't question each other. We can't question.
This
and
is
I'm putting it.
Yeah. Anything.
And this is intimidation.
Divisive, right? It's divisive. And they're big. They're like, Civil War, you want dissension, whatever. No, it's not Civil War. Everybody in the UFO field agrees that you guys are a cult and you're acting like thugs. So it's only a Civil War to you because you're the ones who are being spelled out. Okay.
And it's correct. And they want control. And what they fail to understand, or what he's trying to sell, as opposed, in my viewpoint, he's trying to sell a closed community run by them, a Jim Jones kind of an approach. Whereas I favor an organic community where if I don't like something that Daniel says, I'll say, well, come on, Daniel, let's slug it out. And I may never agree with you, but at least it's there, it's open, everybody talks about it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so here we've got this control stuff coming on in, and we note that a lot of it is towards an economic base. Actually, all of it appears to be economically directed, all right? So it's not like we've got a situation where Corey Good's goal as galactic ambassador is to feed the poor, and he's really, really, really pissed with all of us for interfering with that because he's bound and determined to give $1 million a day to feed the poor or something, right? It's not that kind of motivation. But we do know that he's very motivated by money, as all of these people are. And I see this in a weird kind of a way relative to the conferences, where I don't go to these things, couldn't take it anyway, but from the outside, it appears as though 2015, 16, and 17, we had a hostile takeover.
Yes.
And now you can't go anywhere without a damn blue chicken being in one of these conferences. And if you don't have one, woe to you.
Woe betide. Woe betide. Absolutely.
Yeah. Something before we get too far onto this, I've got to say that the doxing here is reprehensible. They're really, really, really stupid because they should have been aware when they read it, healthcare worker, and somebody if it was a marketing cult, somebody should have understood that a healthcare worker is a protected class of employee.
Right.
If you go down to a bar and you punch that bartender, there's all kinds of legal ramifications that can happen, assault and all this sort of thing, right? But if you go and you punch a nurse or somebody taking your blood or something like this, you've got an instant 1-year penalty against you because they're a protected class. And doxing them is an assault that is defined within that description of that law.
Excellent point. Excellent.
So because, you know, it provides their already existing enemies or whatever, you know, the ability to get at them and so on. And so when they wrote the law, they said that, you know, revealing a person's home address, phone number, and all this kind of stuff is essentially an assault. And I know these kind of things because I did a year's worth of contracts and torts. Neener, CW.
Well, CW too, of course.
Oh, I love that guy. He's just he's not as good a swearer as Kevin out of Britain, but he's inventive.
Well, this is fascinating, actually, and you're making a great point here, which is the doxing is the line that was crossed that goes beyond rhetoric. And I thought it was funny that actually Church realized that even. And
he's scared. He's scared.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. And they turned on him in a heartbeat. So it shows you something about that mentality. You're talking about them as a gang. Boy, that really makes sense.
Well, and also here's something that's stressing the whole situation. That gang in its heyday was being paid by an outside source. And they had a flow through that was they were getting fat and happy, flying all around, all kinds of cool things happening.
Right.
And that tap was turned off. They were reduced to their own resources. Now things are getting tight, and that gang is starting to get emotional about this sort of thing because they've made a bunch of bad decisions that's cost them dollars as well as time, and they don't have much of either.
Wow, excellent point. And that bleeds us over into these weird blunders of putting people's information out. That's something that they definitely would want to do, but getting in front of it and posting it on their chest and being like, look, here's this guy's address, here's this health worker's information. And, you know, going one level deep, all they had to do was see that he counsels cancer patients.
Yeah. And it's like, you know, nothing is going to piss people off. And like, I'm a cancer patient currently.
Yeah.
And seriously irritated at these people, right?
Yes, absolutely.
You know, I wouldn't want that to happen to anybody that was responsible for my care. So no, and see, here's the thing. All right. I have had some luck because of my weird kind of personality in helping, let's say, or at-risk youth over the many decades. So I've got some skills in this, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I saw for a while that it might be possible to provide a quick slap upside the head and a shake up into reality for Jordan Sather.
Yes.
Now I really question that because I've done some research on it. I often wondered why there was that aspect or aura to him on his videos whenever he was under fluorescent lights. And then I saw one of his videos in which he was talking about kratom and his kratom use. Okay. Now, a lot of people think of this stuff as harmless and an easy way to get and a painkiller, an easier way to get off of opiates.
Right.
Okay. And it is a way to get off of opiates if you can get off of it. But what a lot of people don't realize is that there's two chemicals within kratom that bind to opiate receptors, just as much as morphine. And this is a particularly interesting drug because it doesn't go through the stomach. So it doesn't have the destruction of the agents through the stomach acid. It goes in through the saliva, and it affects the glands, and it affects the eyes and everything in the head this way.
Your appearance actually changes.
Your appearance changes, correct. And I thought I saw some of that within Jordan Sather, and then I had to go and find out for sure. Yeah, indeed, he is a kratom user. He says so, and this kind of thing. And he doesn't say that he stopped the use. And so at this point, I've got to say that there's very little point in trying to pursue any form of a
dialogue.
Exactly so, because you're dealing with. I don't mind talking to people that are stoned. You know, I mean, it's no big deal.
Right.
but at the same time, there are some kinds of agents that basically make that a futile effort if you're attempting to get a behavior change. They got to get out of that situation before they can think about anything else. So
Oh, that's fascinating because you grab this kid out of a health food store, you stick him in as Corey's kid, and you run him through this program. You're like, you're going to become an expert on the secret space. You're going to become, say, you're an expert on deep state or Q or whatever. And then after a while, there's a deterioration that becomes visible. And this stuff, this kid showing up and doxing, along with Daddy Good.
He didn't. So, okay, but see, you're just pointed out exactly why we're in this situation. It's because he was put to where he is. All right. He didn't organically come up through 20 years of fighting it out with people on Twitter and all of this kind of stuff to where your hard edges are smoothed over and you get a little sense. Yeah. He was in one position, and then he was brought into another, and then let's just say something happened, and perhaps somebody from Clear Channel who has CIA connections made some phone calls, and Jordan Sather ends up on Alex Jones. Mega exposure. His YouTube subscriptions swell to just gigantic proportions. Same thing with Twitter. And this poor kid has not got a clue. No skills at managing success. Had never planned for success at this level and is flailing around. Thus, I think a certain edge is put on him, leaning towards increased drug use, which does not help the situation at all. And then he actually believes these doofuses, all right, or appears to, right? He appears to believe the story, and that doesn't help either.
This is an interesting thing because, like a cult, really, they like people to be on stimulants and things like that because it makes their position a lot easier. But what I find interesting about that is, when you put somebody out there, you've said it yourself, which is that in the end, you realize, oh, that's the patsy in the poker game.
Right. He's the disposable one.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's how the cult works. They don't care about, I said this from the very beginning, when the first did the Corey's Kids thing, is the kids can be people who come in just trying to do something meaningful with their lives. The cult just sees them as a lemon to squeeze out. And when they
a tool, yeah.
I mean,
you don't need it once and if it causes you a certain level of problems, it's gone.
Absolutely. And I mean, Teresa, right? She comes out, she gets away from them. Literally 2 days later, they're on her, right? And they're saying, oh, she's a plagiarist or whatever it is, things that didn't bother them for 2 years, supposedly, and they just make up some BS to try to make her look bad. And they have somebody in their cult come out with a statement. I mean, this is how it works. There's no leaving the cult. That's
right. And actually, she has not left the cult and didn't really do much of anything, in my opinion, relative to doing that. And she's got a hard road ahead of her. And I'm also of the opinion that that Jimmy Church is part of this gang, and that what he has done violates the payola laws of the 50s and 60s, late 50s and 60s, in that he, in exchange for, in a non-business way, in exchange for favors granted, she's granted airtime. Now, I don't know, because I haven't wanted to investigate, if Jimmy Church is actually broadcast out over the air on his Fade to Black radio. If he goes out over terrestrial radio stations, then indeed this brings it up to the level that the FCC could investigate as a payola issue, a bribe. Okay. And so I don't think this is anything other than just that. The cult starts hammering her on one side and she's offered a bribe on the other. And, off she goes into the clutches of the cult, which is Jimmy Church still. Now, there seems to be some infighting in the gang, but how much of that is illusion? We don't know. These are tricky fellows.
You're making a very interesting point here, which is what it goes back to is actually the environment that was created that allowed this to exist. And the environment was, oh, hey, Corey Good as Enoch coming up on Jimmy Church, Corey Good as Enoch coming up on Gaia TV. That they took this circus thing and they put it front and center. And then, not dealing with the guy and his troubled past, his own kind of history there with the restraining order and all these things. They just want to push this out. And then Wilcock is the man who brings forward these people. He gets his finder's fee through Gaia, makes them kind of go into this routine, amps it up, coaches them or whatever. And then he's sitting there, pumping them up. And, even recently he had the opportunity to separate himself from what they were doing. And instead he said, oh, well, as we know with Corey Good, he had all this like information about Egypt and all this, still playing this trap with his audience because he doesn't want to give up that he knows in relation to Good, that this is a farce, and he doesn't want to give in. So these guys are never going to come forward and say, yeah, we made the whole thing up. But
but there is, let me just point out something right there especially about David Wilcock, because you bring this up relative to Good. As a cunning linguist here, yes. I paid attention to what I was listening to.
Okay, yeah, right, all right.
Wilcock's language relative to Good has changed.
Okay, how?
Okay, I made a bunch of notes here, okay? So
yeah. Take your time.
In the show with Jimmy Church, especially about the doxing, David says that Corey Good is the he's the point of responsibility. Okay, and he actually points this out and says that Corey, not David, not anybody else, but Corey got a strong response from the community that was negative in many ways. Well, Sherlock, David Sherlock, you got to pay attention. Yeah, it was really negative, but his language to this was basically distancing him from Good, one arm's length separation. I got Corey Good to accept the idea that this was a bad idea to do the doxing. Okay. And so on. So his language, if you go and listen to it, he's putting his arm's length out. This is the first time I've ever heard that. He now also says, by the way, that he's turned his back on channeled information, which what does that do to the law of one and his connection to the my name is Ra and all of that?
Ra, absolutely. So yeah, the end of Ra. Okay.
Okay.
And now he's just what? A Christian conservative Q supporter?
Yeah, actually, I think he's trying to move into the Christian market because there's more of them than there is the New Age UFO crowd.
Well, that's what a marketing cult would do. They'd size up. Where's the larger demographic here? Oh, hey,
sure.
Things taken off. Okay.
Yeah, and he's honed his skills. He knows what he's doing. Now he's got to go up against the big dogs in the Christian market, and he's going to run into people that are very serious about their marketing cult. And the rumors are that a lot of those guys bury their problems or bury their competition. Okay, take that any way you want.
Right.
So, but he's in an interesting situation here because he's trying to distance himself from Good, but there's still there's a huge level of involvement, and things are going all to hell at this particular point. And this business with Jimmy Church and the doxing, they know they stepped over the line, and I think some of them are now becoming aware that they've stepped over legal lines as ethical or moral ones.
Yeah. And their response, Good's response all day on Twitter is, I'm going to sue everybody, it's like, I'm going to sue this guy and I'm going to sue this guy.
Let's qualify this. Okay.
Yeah.
So the trademark, everybody has to understand that trademark is very interesting because it is a level of scope issue. First off, at a very basic level, a trademark gets you nothing. You spend $80, $100, you get your trademark, and it is of absolutely no use to you. Its legal purpose is that you can sue with what's known as prejudice. Okay, you are prejudged to have gotten off your ass and filed for the legal right to use these terms is what it comes down to. But in order to protect your trademark, you have to take some action. So my thought was, let Corey get the trademark. I would love it. And then I'm going to use it all damn day and make him sue me so I can get discovery and hammer his ass into the ground.
Got it.
That was my evil plan. Okay.
You're right.
And so, but see, here's the thing about this. On Jimmy Church's show, David Wilcock says, I have convinced Corey that they're still going ahead with trademark on other terms. Just because they let SSP go, all the other stuff is still valid.
Right.
Anyway, though, he says, I have convinced Corey to let the little people go that are within the community using these words that are LARPers or any of these other words and use all of the SSP words, and we're not going to hassle them. Well, this marketing cult is really stupid because there's a saying in law that a trademark once not defended can never be defended.
Right.
So if I were to trespass on his trademark SSP thing, or any of his trademarks, and he does not sue me, when he goes to sue someone else, or when he sells it and they go to sue someone else, the judge is going to say, but you let that guy there yammer on for 4 years using your language and all of this kind of stuff. You can't now expect to apply a sanction against this other company just because they've got more money than that guy did.
Right. That's it.
So they're in a box, right? They don't understand what they're dealing with, and they're not really business guys. I've been in business with my first business license since like 1972. So I've seen this stuff from the inside, and so none of this really makes sense. That's why I say they're a gang. They're more of a bumbling gang than a marketing cult, because they may know how to sell stuff at some level, but they're not really slick at it. And they've got problems with all of the trademark issues in terms of how they're presenting it. And also, what they fail to grasp is a trademark can be approached. So we could have Daniel List trademark SSP, and he could do it as Dark Journalist Presents SSP Info. And there would not be squat that Corey Good could do about it, even if he had the trademark for SSP, because you've qualified the SSP term with a level of specificity that he cannot breach.
Right.
And so it doesn't get them what they want anyway.
Got it.
Now, I do know from, I have a bunch of insiders, but usually my insiders are low level. Okay, I don't know a whole lots of high level people, but I know people that lurk about in low level places, because I've been in the IT business. Right? They always shove us down in basements and all of this kind of stuff.
The lurkers. Yes.
There you go. But I happen to know from some IT guys that there have indeed been presentations to what we would think of as major marketing corporations around the idea of the Corey Good fantasy line. Okay. Yeah. So it was part of a much larger effort, that maybe their target might be Netflix, or it might be what's the name, one of these game producers, that sort of thing. And they were trying to tie up a bunch of this stuff, but they also went around and did it in such a crude way that they really irritated a lot of corporate entities, who now have to spend money on lawyers in order to kick the chickens off the road.
Wow. Amazing. I was thinking one of the things that I was looking at them and saying, well, their Gaia money is gone, and a lot of these conferences are looking at them and saying, troublemaker. And, I was thinking to myself, is their next strategy to suck up these trademarks and try to sue people as a revenue stream?
They're the troll business. Okay. So I don't think they've got the big bucks behind them to do the suits.
Okay. Right. So it's all legal letter time. Here's your
correct. It's intimidation again. Only instead of muscle on the street coming to your door, pound, it's legal muscle.
Right. Okay, it's like what they try to scare Jason Rice with, basically.
Right.
Fascinating. I want to point something out to you right now. I'm going to remind everyone you're watching Dark Journalist. We're here with the indomitable Clif High, who, let me tell you, I don't think there's anyone out there who's had more of a go-around with the Blue Chickens than Clif, and I'm right up there, but he certainly has had his fair share, and they're fans. I can tell you one thing, though. I think you and I both noticed that compared to last year, where they seem to have a much more dedicated base coming out and defending them and all those weird groups and stuff, I haven't noticed that as much. And it seems like their own internal support has diminished greatly since Gaia dropped them like a hot potato. Let's take a look at this. Marvel Comics opposed trademark from alien conspiracy theorists. Marvel Comics is representing, they're asking the U.S. government for an extension to oppose a trademark applied for by Good Enterprise Solutions from Texas for a comic book called Return of the Guardians. So they were putting together on the good side this thing, and Marvel Comics is saying, hey, we have Guardians of the Galaxy. You're ripping off our IP. I mean, these are major now corporations looking at them and saying, So that's kind of what you were just talking about with that entertainment wing, looking at them and saying, get the Blue Chickens off the road.
And they really blew it here. They didn't examine the nature of the environment they were in. I'm a pretty good businessman. If I had a product that, or I would be aware of products that were similar to mine in my realm. So you would kind of think they would have run across the idea that they had the Guardians of the Galaxy out there. And a smart guy is going to think, oh, well, okay, there's all of these other words that can be applied to Guardians that undoubtedly they're going to franchise, they're going to use in the franchise. One of them is Return of the Guardians. That's a big
Right.
duh. You know? I mean, that was probably their next rollout title, right? So again, once again, you know, these people are doubling down on stupid in their approach to things. And then to get a big player with deep pockets looking at even that aspect of it now opens up every other thing that the chicken guys are doing to examination. So I would suspect that they dare not bring out a comic book, that Above Majestic is going to just be examined for, you know, in minutia, probably with software for all of these IP plagiarism things going on.
Right.
And you're dealing with an inherent keiretsu, which is to say an interlocking chain of corporations that tend to concentrate within one particular area or category. This would be the entertainment industry. So by getting Marvel pissed at you, how much do you think that's going to translate to any other Hollywood studio? You know, and then what's going to happen with Contact in the Desert? Okay, next year, Corey Good can't mention Blue Avians. Gaia's going to sit on him. Yes. Marvel's going to sit on him. So does he have a venue at Contact in the Desert? He's not going to be able to mention anything without, if he mentions SSP, you know, I'm quite certain I could find someone to sit in the audience and laugh at him.
Yeah.
So they're in a world of hurt, and thus the desperation.
Well, it's the marketing cult gambit, which was consolidating, taking over, muscling in, pushing these people out of conferences. You know, people who were doing investigations on them, they were threatening them, trying to take deplatform them, whatever, social media. Now they're in a weird situation where they don't have that big corporation Gaia behind them and what they do. And that's a very diminished position. When they start acting out of that, you start to see, oh, these guys aren't playing with a full deck.
It's fractured. Okay, prior to Jay Weidner leaving, everything was planned. It was organized. It was all part of a strategy that had tactics in it. Now there's no overall strategy that's appearing. Each and every participant within the gang is starting to implement their own tactics, as we see with Jimmy Church going and saying, Corey, you shouldn't have done that. And David Wilcox saying he's hands distance from Corey and it's all Corey's fault. And this kind of language. So the next expected, in my mind, the next expected development is going to be the actual breakup of the collective in some fashion. Now, it could be that it doesn't get broken up, that they don't break up, that they're simply all rounded up. Because I do believe that they've strayed over a number of areas that could be made into actionable, especially with the healthcare worker thing. I mean, that was so stupid.
Yes, this is exactly the page that I'm on. That was so stupid, and there are echoes everywhere about deeper levels now looking at them and what they're doing. And you know, those people on the healthcare side, they don't mess around, and that was a really stupid thing to do. And they doubled down with. On Chanter and his dad today, you know, that sock puppet account that's associated with them and what they do, you know, and they're still blowing steam on their own Twitter saying, hey, you know, it's cool that it got doxxed, you know, this is good. And, or I didn't dox anybody. I'm the victim, you know, but not taking it back. So that's really a thing. Now, what's interesting is you mentioned TM there, and someone pointed out to me who's a pretty big Star Trek fan about Enterprise, and a few years before, this is the unnamed Sphere Builders. Here's the Sphere Builder. This is in the there we go. So now we're trying to see, okay, Sphere Beings, there's some Blue Avians in there. So we're seeing where this whole fantasy came out of. Now, Bill Ryan, who runs Project Avalon, was part of Project Camelot, and brought out Corey Good initially, and then immediately had problems with him. He told me a couple of years ago now in an interview that basically what he saw was incredible jump in the weird stories that the cult was telling, and that expansion is kind of that marketing grid I was talking about, getting in and plugging in those different categories in order to expand the audience base. And so I think what's happened now with the way that you've described this from your own insiders, and what we do know is that since they're out of Gaia, they're scrambling around now, and now's the time for everybody here to take a good look at what they're doing, doxing people and the other unprofessional behavior, etc., and really focus in on them and get that influence out of this field.
That's sort of my hope, right? I'm a as the UFOologists say, I'm a nuts and bolts kind of guy, right? That's my approach to ufology. I'm also a consciousness kind of guy, but I've got a nuts and bolts approach to that, right?
Yes.
So it's my hope that these guys will be, off preening their feathers elsewhere, and it remains to be seen how it's going to end up here. But something that people will not necessarily take into account when we say that they no longer have the Gaia money behind them. It's not just money alone. There's a lot of individuals that work for Gaia that provide logistics support that keep people from making mistakes. And we're seeing a lot of these mistakes that are being made here. And then, as we say, the doubling down on stupid as they continue pushing on some of these. And these people don't understand, and it's really sad because, I mean, some of them should understand there's another kind of IP, right? Which is your internet address, the internet protocol address that is tracked, it goes everywhere.
Right.
And not necessarily everybody that's involved with sock puppet accounts on Twitter is going to use a VPN consistently. And so there's trails, guys. And just because you say you're not associated with that account does not mean anything in the digital world. So, there's
yeah, fantastic. Wow, amazing. Everyone, we're talking to Clif High. This is unbelievable analysis and overview of the bizarre cult explosion of the Blue Chicken Gang with Corey Good coming in. One thing I always wanted to ask you about this, Clif, is the actual secret space program research, the kind of research that Dr. Farrell was doing. And, when I was there with Catherine Austin Fitts in 2015, getting into the missing trillions about this program, do you see in any way at all logistical support from intel agencies, military contractors, and that kind of thing, getting the fairy story out there, the circus story out there?
Sure. That's
away from the real deal.
Yeah, and it's not a situation of where you would expect anybody involved with the chicken cult to have any connection in any way, shape, or form with any military or any real intel. Every time David Wilcox says the word intel, we should have a drinking game and we should all get hammered. Same thing with discernment. Now, I don't drink, and I'm not really suggesting that, right? I'm just saying I'm sick of the word. But yeah, the Corey Good came out of nowhere. He had done some considerable analytic data mining of Project Avalon.
Right.
We know that this was done from a particular IP address, but we don't know how it was done. Okay, we don't even know if it was done by him. And so let me postulate some stuff around a fact.
Right.
All right. The only thing that Teresa Llaneros said, and we should probably come back and talk about her NDA issues, but the only thing she said that was solid was that and I repeatedly questioned it, and I finally broke through under the emotional stress of the interviews that she was giving out that day. And she finally stated that as an interviewer who was there in this process, that the woman that is Corey Good's wife used notes to get through the interview. So, and this was like a giant aha moment to me, okay, because she's stating it as a fact. She was there. She saw Stacy or Phoenix or whatever this woman's name is use the notes. And this means that woman is not privy to Corey Good's wife is not privy to what Corey Good had told the rest of the world about their life together.
Right.
Okay, so she was in the dark here because he was doing this LARP on his own, and he had to fill her in. It was so complicated she couldn't keep it straight. They were trying to put the interview together to pump up his solidity and his validity by saying, here's a woman who's actually seen dimples in the wet grass. Oh my God, right? And
So they,
so
they had to create a timeline there with her reading the notes. So yes, yeah.
right. So the implications of that are rather profound. And it probably means that the situation is similar to one, or could be characterized as where Corey Goode was a very, very, very useful idiot.
Yes.
And that his mental proclivities were of a particular kind, that those people that wanted a useful idiot found him to be more useful than the other people that David Wilcock had offered the job to.
Right.
Okay, there's something about this.
Yeah.
When I go and I look and stuff, I see that there's enough evidence out there with appropriate timestamps on them to suggest that C.W. Chanter is 100% accurate, and that David Wilcock did indeed offer the Galactic Ambassadorship to Shane the Ruiner.
Right.
But there's something about Shane, okay? Shane and Corey Goode are not anywhere near the same kind of personality. And Shane was never, ever, ever going to be able to pull off the manipulations that Corey Goode has because of that personality. And he would have come up and dropped down very much like Drake or all these other people that David Wilcock has promoted over the years.
He would have done the traditional dance, burn brightly on the stage for a year and a half and flame out.
Right. Now, see, they're in the same kind. They're in a weird situation. If from my viewpoint of their work, they have to constantly escalate the amount of emotional value within the words that they're presenting. Thus, David Wilcock has always got something new, something that's never been revealed before, every single time he speaks. And this is because they're in a funny situation. Their particular, and I know this from a software viewpoint, right? Okay, their particular goal with their audience, and they know they're gullible and they know how their minds work, and their particular goal is to have what had been titled in the 18th or 17th century by great thinkers as the shock of the new. And I'm talking about people in the X crowd. Okay, they knew about this.
Yes.
The shock of the new was translated into dopamine by the time we get into Tavistock in the 1920s.
Right.
Okay, so they need to provide this shock that produces the dopamine reaction within the brain in order to keep their audience quite actually hooked on their material.
Got it.
And this is why David is nowhere near as effective in his books as he is in person, because the shock of the new is best transmitted through the visuals and the dynamic action and the sound and the reinforcement of all the senses that you don't get in a book. They were hoping to achieve this with their Above Majestic, and they failed miserably.
Yeah, they did a crap job on that, and there's a lot of plagiarized material there as well.
And it was rushed, you can tell, and the editing is poor, and all these other, and the hell of it is, if they had come to me about, a year ago, I could have pointed them right at a specific market that would get them 10 or 20 times the sales they will ever achieve with that thing, right? But in any event, we leave that aside. So these guys are in the dopamine business. They're shock of the new dopamine pushers for their audience year after year, encounter after encounter, and so on. And so it puts incredible pressure on them to produce that new stuff. Now, just as an aside, just as a little tangent, this is endemic throughout the bullshit side of the woo-woo world. Okay, mm-hmm. And we see it with Carrie Cassidy and her Mark Richards. He has to come up with outrageous stuff each and every time to keep her audience interested. Same thing is true of Andrew Basiago and all of these individuals with the story.
Installment.
Correct. And you notice that they all flame out because they just can't keep it up. What makes this different, though, is that we have this collective that's self-referential, self-reinforcing, and is able to, well, obviously it's true because he believes it over there, and he's standing there telling you he believes it.
Right. So it's they're up in Hawaii with his lei on saying, "What good is the real thing?" And then we have Jordan over there doing his thing and saying like, we have to protect the Corey Good. And so it's very interesting the way that they lined that up. You're right. It's like a weird circle. So instead of
Hang on just a second.
Yeah,
go. I actually, that's not a weird circle. It's actually a designed marketing approach. I wrote a book about it within advertising for big profits online, that kind of thing, how you use this. And basically you use your Twitter account to reference your YouTube account, which references your webpage, which references your Twitter account.
Marketing 101 with Clif.
Correct.
Unbelievable. Fantastic analysis on this, off the charts. I am going to get us some questions here with Miss Olivia. Miss Olivia, how are we doing?
We're doing great. This is the busiest we've ever been.
I don't know why they like that bastard, but they show up every time he gets on TV.
Clif, what's amazing, of course, is that everyone wants us to talk about the real secret space program, of course, the things that are happening. So we're going to have you back and go in depth on all of these subjects. But for tonight, we're going deep on the cult. They're doxing people left and right. And
they're hurting people. And it's like, my mom was a nurse for 51 years on primarily on 2 continents, okay, but on a number of different countries. So I've seen because I was, as a kid, I'd have to go and just sit there while she was working if no one could take care of me, that kind of thing. And so it's like I was very, very, very personally affected by what they did, and they burned a bridge that is going to be awful hard to overcome or repair.
I mean, and when we think about the work that he was doing and the healthcare that he's providing, I mean,
and look, the poor guy is, he's a young man. He's very sharp. He needs an outlet that is not going to consume him emotionally in the same way. And his permaculture stuff and his permaculture videos, which I loved, don't attract a whole lot of attention. He has a very pleasant personality. He has a very nice screen presence, and he's got a sharp mind. And he put that to work, and he fell into blue chicken shit.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And, it's funny because they came at the rush with me before and they were like, oh my God, he worked at the Wall Street Journal. It's like, yeah, so you're getting all these successful people, right? They have good corporate background. Here's Joe helping people and doing incredible work. CW is a lawyer, it's a real job in the real world. Thank you very much. And here are these people being like, there's a dark alliance and the Illuminati is out to get you. And David Wilcock's like, oh, the Dark Alliance, so they cut my brakes, and
right. And Daniel wears black suits.
So they have that little nightmare part in their mind. But it is fascinating, though, that I felt it fascinating that Dark Alliance. Okay, Gary Webb's incredibly popular book, right? Again, even with their insult, they have to grab the IP theft and use his title.
They project and they leak a lot in their language. Okay, so you notice how the language that they used when they canceled their square dance, their little hoedown there, right?
Masquerade ball,
right? And so what was the key word and all of that they featured in the first sentence with all of this emotional loading around it? Infiltrators.
Yes.
Okay, so they're projecting from their own egos. We're infiltrating this, and they're projecting it out on everyone else. Their language betrays them continuously. That's why, I expected at some point, because of the nature of this and because I was public about it, and way back when I offered to fight them and just settle it, and they should have taken me up on it because I had a huge cancer in me at the time and I wasn't very healthy. But those days are beyond me now, right? I doubt we'll be able to do this settle it mano a mano kind of thing.
Well, you told me that Washington State you can do that, right?
Sure, this is a personal combat state.
Yeah.
There's rules about it, and think of how much money we could make for charity or something if they would show up and do even a non-gi kind of a fight in a dojo. We might rake in $100,000. There'd be so many people online that would want to pay for that. But in any event, though, these guys are straying over our lines continuously. And their whole modus operandi is community. Let's save the community and all of this kind of thing. And so, I've got my dad he was from Missouri, and he had all these rules about things like, man says, trust me, don't trust that bastard. Anybody, he's trying to sell you something, right?
Yeah.
And that's the deal with Jimmy Church. And I think Jimmy Church is afraid. I think that the whole cult thing is starting to break up, and now they are wondering about some of the culpability. There's a bunch of money that was missing, or it's undetermined as to whether or not it was actually used for the purpose intended, relative to
Keith
the
Peterson's fundraiser. Yeah.
correct,
Whole that
correct.
bizarre thing.
Yeah,
This phony situation about, the New World Order came and took his house. No, it was foreclosed. Okay. I mean, when there's real research on that, that was a phony situation. And no, I agree with you. I think what's fascinating is you look at things in a very interesting fashion, and we've been going really into the details here, but you also understand a lot about, being a warrior, I think, which is so interesting. And when you get into media, you really have to adopt some of those tactics. And what I see really is that the main signature of this group is that there's no ethics, there's no ethical center. And this is a big problem when you come into like a new age or UFO or alternative community where ethics are a big deal.
right.
And so they really stand out. They really stand out, pushing people around or demanding huge fees at the last minute, things like that. It's very odd. It's like a weird square peg in a round hole situation. That's what's made them stand out so much to me from a marketing viewpoint, looking at them. And then I realized, there's a cult connection with how they do this. And so a marketing cult in this genre, actually, there's a lot of money to be made, somebody decided.
And certainly they made a lot of money. Gaia undoubtedly, was on track to make all kinds of bucks. But let's look at this in a psychological basis too. A person without a guiding overall ideology, for lack of a better word, or a moral center, is going to judge the world by how much pushback they get. Okay, a person deliberately bereft of such a guiding moral center is frequently labeled a sociopath or a psychopath.
Yes,
they always work by encountering. It's the bully issue, right? He'll keep bullying until someone smacks him down, and he'll keep escalating until someone smacks him down harder. And once he's really smacked down, then he realizes that's the line. You don't go over that line. Well, these are the life lessons that Jordan Sather didn't learn, that Teresa didn't learn, that Corey Good and these individuals didn't learn. And so I've been in dojos since I was 11, and I got the shit beat out of me when I went to encountered this kid in the woods in Germany. And my dad said, enough of that, into judo, and I went into judo, right? and so that frames my attitude here. Yeah. So actually I would suggest to anybody that's a parent, get your kid into a moral martial art that will sustain them when they're in their 50s, and get them in there before they're 7. Okay, 5 to 7 is great for Aikido, great for jiu-jitsu, even in many dojos. Check out the people doing the dojos, though. You don't want to run into a Corey Good in the martial arts field.
Well, what's fascinating, and this is excellent advice, and I think that as we understand the alternative research field, we need it more, which is something like that gives you a center of honor, basically. And so that you have a certain honor and you won't cross that line into dishonorable action. It'll be very obvious, especially when you're dealing with topics like this. So I think that's really, it's an interesting stream of thought that you're bringing in there. Something I would say is professional ethics on my end, and you're coming at it more from this kind of warrior honor thing, which I like that.
I want to have it internalized, okay? I mean, I grew up in the environment of the military as a military brat. So, of course, I'm inculcated into the martial tradition and couldn't help it if I tried, even though I could never be in the military because I'm have a big, huge, giant authority complex and can't stand people telling me what to do. Yeah. And this also intrudes with the blue chicken kind of guys, right? If you're going to push at me hard, I'm going to get really sneaky and come and kick your ass.
Right. Yeah.
So, and I enjoy fighting, because I've been doing it since I was 11. But here's the thing about that. You fight with somebody in a dojo situation, you can go at it tooth and nail, especially when you're in your brown belt years, okay? Because you think you know something, you think you're bad, you think you can go out in the streets, and you fight with people. There's personality conflicts in dojos, but a well-run dojo, all of that stuff ends at the door, and you've learned something by how hard that guy pushed back on the bullshit you were trying to put out, right? And so you don't try and put that bullshit out on the street, because maybe somebody out there won't have the restraint and they'll hit you over the head with a crescent wrench or something.
Yeah, right. Yeah, excellent point. Wow, fascinating. I think these are very interesting fundamental principles, and I feel a lot of that is missing. Of course, it's missing in the mainstream media, but when we really boil that down to that alternative field, we need a lot more of that now. We need to create an entirely new space, especially after this wave of unethical doxing and the unethical trademarking. It's just like enough, where it's like there's something that Rudolf Steiner says, which is sometimes the most spiritual word in the world is no. And we've reached no.
There's huge power there. Yes.
Absolutely. Miss Olivia, I'm going to remind everyone we're watching, you're watching, and we're watching the Dark Journalist Show. It's fantastic to be here with you. What a huge, amazing crowd. I can see great people out there tonight asking fantastic questions. We're going to take some questions with our guest, Clif High, which is the first time Clif High has been on the show. We're going to have him back many times. And of course, he's a great friend of the show. So Miss Olivia, how are we doing over there with questions?
We're doing great. You ready for questions?
Fantastic.
Okay. DT wants to know, since doxing is a crime, did Joe Enchanter go to the police? Who will be doxed next? And Ellen Stewart, one more question. And is doxing a journalist a protected class?
Journalists undercover, that's true. Okay. That if they're actually pretending to be someone else for the purpose of a story, there's a level of protection for that. But I personally won't discuss law enforcement as regards to this.
Absolutely. Yeah. I can say this, that the people involved are taking appropriate action.
Okay. Occult Priestess wants to know, is gang stalking illegal?
Absolutely. Well, what's interesting is the courts have become much more sensitive. It's funny, too. You know what it is? All the Facebook suicides, there's this horrible trend where these high school kids get bullied and for being different or for whatever reason. And the spate of suicides happens, and the courts have caught up with it finally, and they take it very, very seriously. And what's fascinating about it is this wave that we're seeing of people doing this kind of doxing thing. The courts frown on it so much in an actionable fashion. It's not just one of those violations that's on the books and might get you thrown off social media. It's a serious crime. So a lot of crimes were committed there in the last 48 hours against individuals like what we're discussing, the healthcare worker and now Chanter. That's a crime.
And here's the hell of it, too, from that perspective.
Yeah.
Okay, because let's look at it as a strategy and a tactic. Prosecutor may not be willing to put a lot of money into a single doxing incident, but then his investigator comes back and says, this is the tip of the iceberg. I think we got some RICO violations going on here as well. And maybe even some payola stuff, from these older laws.
Yep.
Well, a prosecutor might be inclined to do that because that's the sort of thing that gets you a name, right?
Yep.
Even if it's only putting the Blue Chicken Gang away.
Right. Absolutely. Excellent point. These are the things that are actually on the books that will really do you in if you're acting out there in the public realm in an unethical fashion. And it's real. Miss Olivia.
Okay, so Blue Avian Flu Vaccine wants to know, isn't
Great name. That's a good name.
Isn't Teresa's sister Corey's attorney? Is that still true?
Well, here's an interesting thing. I don't want to get too much into that, and I'll tell you why. Because what happened basically was that Teresa's sister was in law. Teresa had worked around Roger and Corey's stuff. They asked her basically for legal representation to ask the sister to do little things for them, and she got sucked into that whirlpool. That girl, the lawyer, probably should have checked them out more thoroughly, but just the fact that she was working with Teresa, she got into it. And so, my big thing on that is the group really hung her out to dry, because when they sent the Jason Rice letter out, her name was all over it. It didn't say Corey Goods after you. It said, the law firm's name and Teresa's last name. So the sister had to deal with all that rifling around the internet. And of course, as usual, Goods Good and his manager just sit back there and they let the Corey's minions take the hit. They always put somebody else out there. Those people take the hit, and that's not right. If you want to do things like grab trademarks or dox people, you put your own face out there and you take your own knocks for it. But to put these other people out there, I didn't approve of that. And so that's why I don't want to really give them the satisfaction. I'll put it to you that way. But as far as I know, that relationship is due for an abrupt end. Okay.
Well, one other thing on strategy and tactics, right? We don't know for a fact that Corey ever paid this woman. We don't know there was any kind of a legal retainer. She did do some legal work for him. But at the same time, I wouldn't want to say anything further than that on that, because when RICO and these kind of things are involved and they wrap up the big gangs, they always crack the stuff from the edge. People are approached from the edge. So
excellent point. That's a fantastic point. The other thing is, sometimes you can be around people and the things that they're doing are kind of, coming off on you. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're culpable for what they did, but it's unfortunate you got involved with them. And the important thing is to get away from them. And it's important for us on this side of the fence to say, yeah, get away from them. We'll help you. We won't put you down for being associated with them in the first place. Just get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going.
Okay. Nicholas Krupas wants to know, Cliff, if you were contacted in the desert, how should you respond?
That's offering legal advice. Chanter would sue my butt. But here's the thing, right? In a business level, I can see that this was a burner event in a number of different ways, right? When they did this doxing, they burned Contact in the Desert as much as if they'd sent that tent on fire. And here's why: because now the Contact in the Desert people not only have a situation of someone with a very questionable story to begin with, and that's bringing in security and trying to muscle their way in, they now see these people as also actors out in a larger world committing overt criminal acts.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I'm a promoter, which is what Contact in the Desert is. And even if I'm a janky promoter and I've been trained in the music business and I know I'm dealing with gangstas, I'm not going to let somebody in the venue with a loaded arms. You got to check your guns at the door. You got to table that behavior. So, it may be, in my estimation, that there will be fewer and fewer and fewer invitations to these people.
Absolutely. And I want to point out some of the heroes that were around have brought out some of these truths. You think about people like Annette O'Toole, and when we think about Groovy Bean, Yvonne, and Derek Faust, this Navy vet who really worked closely with them and brought a number of things out, and they were furious about it and did all sorts of things to take his video down. I mean, this is an ongoing history with these people, and it goes back, every time you look back further. Somebody from Project Avalon contacted me about difficulties with Good in 2013. I mean, it goes back, so it's this repeating pattern. And I think anybody who invites that, especially after this kind of doxing situation, I mean, it's really, it's the kind of thing where they're going to have to clean it up. The whole thing's going to have to be cleaned up. And
You mean the industry? You mean the industry?
Yeah, the industry, exactly. I mean, people I contact in the desert, that's serious money, and I know people who at the very top of that organization, and they're, in the final analysis, they're sensible enough, in my opinion, to respond to that kind of public outcry against this type of behavior. But what's interesting to me is that with so much money involved in an organization like that, I'd be more careful. I'd be a hell of a lot more careful with that.
I would have people I was paying to be paranoid for me.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. If you can't muster the paranoia, hire
right. I'm mellow today, so you'd better get on it.
Everyone, we're here with Clif High. We're taking questions right now. We're going to take a few more questions here and let's stay on topic with this. This is great. Miss Olivia.
Okay, Mysterious Forces Live. Is Jimmy Church trying to deflect the pressure by calling for a truce?
Well, Mysterious Forces, you've been doing some great shows over there, and you did a great one last night.
Fantastic.
Really catching the moment here, and we appreciate that. I don't know much about Jimmy Church, I'll be honest with you. And my biggest beef with him, besides him inviting the circus into town, was that he said something in favor of Corey Good's trademark. And, that was just unacceptable to me. So I pointed him out working with these people. I do feel like it was like Church, Wilcock, Good creating this weird triangle for the marketing cult to kind of roll in these wild stories like Corey Good as Enoch, weird stuff. I mean, really, not even people come forward with wild stories, but this one just kept getting worse and worse, and it was really trite. So my own feeling is that it seems to me people like that are more interested in the entertainment opportunity, and that the truth aspect, like truth community and things like that, aren't really what they're good at. They come from different fields. They come from sports, or they come from this or that. And that's very different than journalism or alternative media at its heart, in my opinion. I don't know. What do you think of that, Cliff?
Well, here's the thing. Let's do some shock of the new, okay? And so you can validate that I do have an insider into the situation.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'm willing to tell you now what I'll end up maybe having to testify about, and that is that I've had back channel contacts with Jimmy Church for, I don't know, maybe 2 years now.
Okay.
Okay, these have been around him trying to get me on his show, and I wouldn't go on his show because he had Corey Good on there.
Yeah.
Okay, and then a couple of times there were other entreaties to come on, and I told him, yeah, let's, and then finally I told him, no, I'm not going to do this. Okay, and then the time passes, and a number of months go by, and I do certain things, and certain things with the insider take place. And I'm put in front of Jimmy Church again, and I said, okay, sure, I'll go on to Jimmy Church's show. And this was going to be Fade to Black. I don't think it was Coast to Coast. I don't remember, to be quite honest. I'd have to go back and look. And so I'm in contact with Jimmy Church, and he's a funny guy because he keeps saying he's like the truth kind of channel, and I hear him all the time. I went and listened to his show with a bunch of different people, and it's like, this is the bullshit side of the UFO community. It's all stories and strange tales and Ouija boards and stuff, and I don't have much time for that. So I was rather reluctant to begin with. And Jimmy Church wants to do an agenda sweep, I think he called it. Okay, we're going to sweep through your agenda, meaning what are we going to talk about? And of course, the very first thing I wanted to talk about was the bogus blue chickens. Just to get it off my chest. Now, before this occurred, though, he contacted the insider that I know.
Yes.
To get permission to have me on, and was told, because of a mistake in understanding, that I wanted to talk about C60, this health product.
Right.
Okay, and Jimmy Church was happy to have me on and was calculating how big of an audience he was going to get and what he was going to do with all this C60 information. And I didn't particularly want to talk about the C60 stuff. I wanted to talk about the blue chickens. And he found that out, put me on email hold for a minute, reconfirmed with the insider, and all of a sudden everything's off, and I get this very precisely worded 30-word rejection saying, I won't have negativity or questions on my show about this. And then since then, it's been a rather acrimonious, and Jimmy Church has blocked me on Twitter and this kind of stuff. Right.
He's going to keep the game going, and there's no question about that he did that. This is his MO, and it's very interesting.
But my point is, he owns the show.
Yep.
He didn't contact his radio station or any of this. He contacted somebody in an entirely different corporation for permission to do this. That is like de facto definition of gang behavior. And when the prosecutors present this, they'll say, Your Honor, or members of the jury, these defendants have repeatedly demonstrated a pattern of criminal activity. And that criminal activity as a pattern has been impressed here, and here. And it's the same pattern placed against these various different arenas.
Fascinating. Absolutely. It's an excellent point, because you always need that pattern in law. And there is a beautiful example of it. Why is he contacting the insider to get permission to have you on?
Right.
Wow.
Right.
Olivia, well, that answers itself. My God. And a little insight into how all this stuff works in the back channel. So thank you, Cliff. Miss Olivia.
Okay, Christine Taggart, how big a mess is this? Have we just scratched the surface?
It's a big mess. It's a large scale mess for the blue chickens. And the cult aspect, it's very interesting because it's just overplaying hands. You get into one sticky situation, the minute you get out of it, you plunge yourself back into it. And so yeah, now it's a snowball rolling downhill.
And we don't know where it's going to unravel, right? I mean, there may have been a number of various other aspects and things that we're just totally unaware of at this stage that will show up. I think of it as a mess that's excisable. We've lost 3 years, in my estimation, in the UFO world to this particular episode. Hopefully, lots and lots and lots of people have learned from this. I get a lot of heat on Twitter and other social media for digging and digging and digging and digging. And two things to understand. Some people have to be shown repeatedly in order to grasp what's going on, alter their paradigm, and then accept the new information. And so that's why I repeatedly point out where all the flaws and stuff are on these kind of things.
It's an excellent point. Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, you make the point about 3 years. That's pretty powerful, actually, because it's a wasted opportunity. You think about people discovering things about the secret space program, how getting this distorted version out there with these wild whistleblower tales, and completely off the charts, rigged really by a marketing cult, and then everybody dealing with that instead of getting at the real thing, so that by the time we show up in 2019, we've lost 3 years of being prepped for what's really going down.
Well, then there's my personal aspect of this, right? Because I'm human and I'm really pissed at a personal level because over those 3 years, as a consultant, I used to bill out about 2,000 to 2,800 hours a year. Okay, over these 3 years, I had put in probably let's just say 8,000 hours, 2,000 of which, a whole year's worth of extra labor, trying to track down where my system was going bad, where my system was getting polluted. Now, I don't think that they in any way, shape, or form tried to deliberately pollute my system. And I think when I shut it down for them, it really put them in a world of hurt. Because once I did my video, they instantly stopped saying anything about Antarctica because they realized that, it was a booby trap. We fell into the booby trap, right?
Yeah. It was fascinating, actually. It was the greatest validation for what you put out there as a booby trap. And they said, our insider said no more information about Antarctica. Yeah.
Yeah, right, dude, right.
There you go.
Exactly. And so it personally validated me. And from that point forward, my anger was not only justified, it was rewarded with the satisfaction of knowing that I had found my enemies and I'd pinged them and we were engaging. And it's one of those things where, like I say, I lost 2,000 hours of my time. My employee's time scrubbing the database and stuff, we probably lost close to 1,000 hours of his time. This cost me big dollars, as well as polluting my work for the other part of the 3 years. So of course I take this personal. And now they're doing things to my adopted cousin here, in doxing him. And it's like, dude, you're messing with family,
Yeah, no, it's a bridge too far. It's totally a bridge too far. Excellent point. Okay, everyone, you're watching Dark Journalist. I'm here with Clif High. We've gone deep now into the secret space program distortion of this marketing cult coming in with the whole blue avian mess and their extreme doxing of community members in the field. And, it's at a level where we can't take it anymore. And thank God there have been people like Cliff, and Cliff and I know because we've gone deep into it. And people say, why spend time on Corey Good and all that nonsense, because it's kind of in the way of the real thing and it's polluting the whole system that we're in. So, you deal with ethics, you deal with the drug dealer in your neighborhood, or else you wind up with the crack family next door. So you got to kind of make a move. Okay, Miss.
Yeah, and you deal with the roach because there's more behind the wall.
Right.
Okay.
Olivia Wisdom.
Actually, we're from Occult Priestess.
Oh, Occult Priestess. Okay.
Yes. The Cosmic Garden wants to know: are we the fodder between TTSA, big government disclosure, and the New Age cosmic soap opera? Is this designed to create division within the community? And where do we go collectively from here to guard against this?
Well, there are different levels there in that question. It's pretty interesting. What I would say is this, that there's the squeeze on one side from Intel. Okay, I consider that the TTSA squeeze. On the other side, there's a squeeze from marketing. Maybe Intel likes that squeeze because they like to play into entertainment and fantasy. So there's two squeezes on alternative research. In alternative research, we show a lot of power, actually, because it's not, it's a Wild West situation, so information can rise still. That doesn't happen in the mainstream media. I know, I was there. By the way, when I was in mainstream and covering politics, when people would defect from groups, when groups would lose members, when a politician's staff, somebody would resign, it's a big deal. And what happens there is interesting, because when you see that happen and then you see the politician start to mouth off and do stupid things, it means there's dissension inside the group on the political end. That informs a lot of the investigations that we've been doing, because we take a look at the situation and we can apply these types of principles to it. So we can see when this group over here was losing members and was saying, doxing people and going wild, it means there's something wrong inside, that they're, it's a spiral, basically. That's what you do when you spiral. You wouldn't do that ordinarily. You'd be sitting, living the high life, having caviar. But what's interesting about what is pointed out here is, since there's a push on the Intel side to distort things like the secret space program research, because it'll get too close to the Space Force, it'll get too close to the missing trillions, on one hand. And then you have marketing forces coming in, which have always dominated in the New Age side of it. All that stuff, drum below from years, like it's been an ongoing thing. Right down the middle is this very narrow path. And, you find some great people working in that space, some of the best, because they're not in the mainstream, but they're in that squeeze right between those two incredible forces, Intel and marketing. That's where you get G.G. Young. That's where you get Dr. Joseph Farrell. That's where you get Catherine Austin Fitts. There is incredible work there, but it is being squeezed by the circus of the marketing on one hand and by Intel bullying and manipulation on the other.
There's another, again, strategy and tactics aspect to this, okay, but at a much bigger level. And that is eliminating the idea of community and just looking at us as tribes, as vertically integrated tribes in a marketing fashion.
Yes.
Then we're in a particular vertically integrated tribe that the government just doesn't give a rat's ass about. They don't care. Intel is simply a tool of the government. And the government would no more try and harm Carrie Cassidy with a directed energy weapon than they would try and cut David Wilcock's brakes, okay? The government cannot afford failure if it's going to try and take extreme unction against people, right?
Yeah.
Okay, they must succeed, and it's got to succeed in such a way that there's plausible denial. So all of these self-aggrandizing stories of, oh, they told me I would be killed if I revealed this is all bullshit. But there are companies that do things with artificial intelligence and computers at levels that are far beyond what I do, but they're basically the same kind of algorithms. One of these companies might be, say, Predictive Future. Okay, this is a company that might be funded by a thing called IntelQ. IntelQ is the financial arm of CIA for private industry. It's their venture capital arm. These large companies advise the government on sometimes very ephemeral things. So a very interesting question to put into somebody like Predictive Future would be to ask them from the government's perspective, at what point will the society be such that we will be forced to do disclosure? And what would be the criteria and the characteristics that would cause that scenario to develop?
Right.
And so they may run all their numbers and their AI and stuff, and that may be the reason that certain things happen at a certain time, is that there's direction going on, and all they are attempting to do is to simply delay. The way all politicians want to do. You also have to consider that the people that run the intel agencies and all of the below ground special access projects have at the top of their project, at their division, at their department, somebody who is basically a politician. And their goal as a politician, as a manager, is not on my watch. Okay, I want to retire. I want to get my pension. I don't want to have to deal with all this work, extra work.
Kicking the can down the road further.
Correct. And so they actually hire companies such that they can go on out and say to this company, what's going to be the trigger? And they may say, okay, it looks kind of like we can get the emotional response building up in this integrated tribe, which just so happens to blend entertainment with UFOs. And if they actually are able to raise it to this emotional level within the mainstream media, you guys got real problems. Yes. And so the government might say, okay, CIA, whatever, go over there and disrupt this stuff and just, kick it out 5 years, right?
Yep.
And this is where we end up with this kind of stuff here at this stage. And the government does things at that level. And I am aware that these things have occurred because I've lived long and I've seen much. And in my history of this, these small kind of projects are done very well. It's when the government gets up into things like Vietnam that they really screw up.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm quite convinced that there has been some of this that's been going on, because I have noticed within my own work a suspicious level of activity by corporations within data mining of our quote community. But what I'm going to say is of the linguistics that are expressed by this vertically integrated tribe. They're showing up in a lot of government stuff. And so they're analyzing this, and have been for probably 8 years, pretty solid. So the appearance of Corey Goode, the mining of Project Avalon was more or less expected. And the guy who works for me managing my server garden, it's not large enough to be called a farm, he actually is ex-Air Force Intel, but he was an IT guy. All he did was manage Cisco routers and run wires and all of this kind of stuff, right? Did not know anything that was going through the wires. He just connected the wires. And he had top level security clearances, because you don't want someone without those connecting your wires. And he and I talked about this some time back, and he was of the opinion that things are heating up within this particular aspect of our planet, meaning, the USA and this kind of thing. And it is coincident that a lot of this activity and language has come up with the the spread of the 3G night vision goggles. Okay, so this is why when I first encountered the Corey Goode story, I kind of wondered, okay, because I've had the pairs of these goggles for well over 10 years. I'd actually have to think about when I actually got my pair, and I've seen stuff out in space. And so ever since I saw those first squadrons of triangular shaped objects moving around and working training maneuvers near the constellation of Cassiopeia as a background, but about only 145 miles out from the Earth, I knew at some point there was somebody flying those, even if it was a drone from down here, even if it was remote controlled, somebody was controlling those. And sooner or later, some of these people are going to get drunk and start talking about it. And it's like, aha, it's getting to the point where if it's flying around in the sky, it's almost undeniable. And that's why I cut Corey Goode slack, because there is going to be somebody that's legit that does this, right? Yes. It just isn't him.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I believe in whistleblowers coming forward. I think, if anything, that they've tarnished the entire reputation of real, legitimate whistleblowers. That's another problem that I have with it. But you mentioned something very interesting, and I want to point this out, which is that these contained operations can be very effective. And I think what you're alluding to is it's the kind of project you would give to a military contractor, almost like a Booz Allen Hamilton type or somebody lower on that chain. And they could handle this very tight little op and bring those results back and say, this is what we did and this is what we found.
And you'd never know about it. Okay. And here's something. So I'm not going to go into a great deal of details. I'll give you an overall sketch. All right. So my father gets out of Vietnam, and he retires from the military as a lifer, and he's an officer, and he's a colonel, and he doesn't know what he's going to do, but he wanted to make some money and go into business, and he got offered this job. And the job was to basically do what he did best and had been trained at, which was to be a military officer for a private army. And he was offered this job of taking back a particular section of train track that ran down the backside of the mountains and a couple of 100 miles off of the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And it was used for ferrying drugs, but it was also the Laotian railway, and they wanted it back. And they couldn't be seen pissing off the drug companies. So what it ended up was this daisy chain of effects until a USA contractor hired my dad and some other guys here to go and work with German and French soldiers to take this train back. Okay, and if you weren't family, you didn't even know this thing was going down. And it was a 6-month operation that was wildly successful. And the government retrieved the train. The drug dealers didn't know what the hell hit them. And it was all good. And it was a narrowly defined operation that was given to a skilled individual. And the constraints were such that there was no spillover. Now, whoever it is that had been managing the isolation of this vertically integrated tribe has to deal with spillover that is probably causing them all kinds of itchy butt syndrome.
Yeah, that is fascinating. Wow, amazing. That's great analysis. Cliff, thank you so much. You're watching Dark Journalists. We're deep now into our analysis around the cult, and which is really impinged on the research around the secret space program, which is a totally legitimate issue. And we're going to show just how legitimate it is. Yes, he's back. Miss Olivia, we're going to take the last few questions here.
Okay. So everybody wants to know about Jordan Sather's relationship with Robert David Steele and whether Steele is complicit in all this.
There's more about Steele, but I see is Steele working, ex-CIA guy. He's out there on the internet. People know him. He did Unrig and all this kind of stuff. He showed up on Alex Jones talking about slave colonies on Mars very unusually. And then he gave a kind of weird interrogation to Carrie Cassidy on her show. Really weird, bizarre stuff. And he wanted to be on my show and was pushing his way onto my show. And he said to, I'm going to have like a dinner with Trump's son or whatever. And I said, well, have fun. I don't work with CIA guys on my show very often. So, and by the way, I choose who comes on the show. So, yeah, not really somebody you're going to see on the Dark Journalist show. That much I can guarantee you. One thing, an interesting question that I had actually, well, I guess I should let you get your last question in. Go ahead.
Joseph Farrell wants to know, what effect will the whole blue chickens TTSA thing have on the conference culture in this country? Wow,
amazing question, Cliff. Let's start with you.
Well, as I say, it's a strategy and tactics thing from a business viewpoint. If I were a promoter and I was running one of these, even if I knew my audience wanted to see these individuals, I would have to start thinking about insurance, liability. You've got a situation here that Contact in the Desert, potentially, and I think you'd have to ask somebody like CW, but I think maybe she's got 7 years. But imagine the situation where you've got Patty Greer that is convinced that she was a targeted individual at Contact in the Desert by whoever, and they aimed some energy weapon at her and caused her harm. All right, it doesn't matter whether I believe that or anybody believes that. If she can get an attorney to believe that, she's got potentially an actionable situation there that will cost Contact in the Desert money, because when she sues whoever it is that she thinks held the ray gun, her attorney's going to be smart and say, Contact in the Desert, dollars, money. So, if you've got somebody that is potentially mentally less solid than they perhaps should be, again, you've got potential actionable information from whatever their behavioral response is to the Corey story as it unfolds. Also, you now have the breakdown of the story. So I'm not even sure personally. I would say that I'm not a betting man. I don't think gambling is really it doesn't appeal to me and that kind of thing. But I would say that there's probably about at least 50% chance right now that Corey's invitation and David's invitation to Contact in the Desert is gone. They just don't know it yet.
Well, that's very interesting too, because once you're out of that umbrella of the Gaia situation, you were talking about it. It's not just working for them directly; it's all the logistics around it and how there's a promotion engine, which we know from your story about church contacting them. So very, very interesting. One thing I want to point out here too is that I think that the conference culture, and I go to other conferences relating to technology and all sorts of other things. There are amazing conferences happening. There are amazing TED Talks happening. There's all this stuff that's going on. And unfortunately, TED is not a good enough venue for getting real ideas out, as Graham Hancock found out. But, all these incredible things are happening. And then in UFO land or in alternative research land, in the conference culture around the alternative, there's a stagnant thing because they've all gone in for, splashy kind of over the top stories, and this guy killed 3,000 ETs and all the rest of it. So I think, and not to be myopic about it or self-aggrandizing, but when we did the conference in Austin, honestly, when you have the brain trust, and we were lucky to have the late, great Jim Marrs there, Jim Marrs, Linda Moulton Howe, Joseph Farrell, Catherine Austin Fitz, former Assistant Secretary of Housing, real government experience, Joseph Farrell, Oxford scholar, just amazing people. And that's the real thing, which is people can get so much, on the interesting, really in-depth knowledge side. There's incredible resources available. And unfortunately, this other thing has really taken that culture down. But I feel like a rebound is at hand, just as we've talked about things like this resurgence of the mystery schools from 100 years ago. Well, I'm feeling a resurgence of the conference culture. There's no question about it.
Into real self-education, though, people really willing to work at it, because it's fine if Corey Goode and these people are selling entertainment and you want to buy entertainment, fine, guys, I got no problem with that. Have at it. More power to them. I hope they have a great future in the entertainment business.
Absolutely.
But here's something true. Trademarks are used and applied to fiction. Okay, you can copyright a story that happened to you, but you can't trademark the terms that are in reality. Excellent. So you can't run out and trademark a term, I worked for Microsoft, right? Or you can't trademark the term you have mail. These are things that happen in reality, that kind of thing.
Excellent. It's a huge difference. It really is. Once you get into the trademark aspect of your story and you're trademarking your story, that means it's a work of fiction.
And here David Wilcox said explicitly that what their goal is, and he tried to mollify the community. Now, I've got authority issues. I'm not a social being. You piss me off if you bring up community, okay?
Yeah.
Just because I don't relate. But he's trying to mollify it by saying we're not going to go after the little guys. And I beg to differ. He must go after everybody if he's going to go after anybody. But they're saying that they want to prevent the YouTube people from stealing their videos egregiously, which has been going on for 3 years. My, we have suffered terribly. I'm weeping blood here from all of my videos being stolen. and he says that their even greater fear, Corey Goode's greatest fear, is that some major movie mogul or studio will take his ideas and create a vast giant franchise off of them, and Corey Goode will get absolutely squat out of it. And that's why they're trademarking it.
I thought his greatest fear was the Dark Alliance. What happened?
No. David Wilcox says that's the Dark Alliance we're just a bump in the road to them. Their greatest fear is that they're going to be ripped off by the giant mega corporations, right?
Unbelievable.
And it's like, oh
by the way, sullying Edgar Casey's name by pulling it along with that trash, that's pretty bad. Okay, so let's get Casey's name out of that, especially in search engine results. Miss Olivia.
There was a little denial in the chat that he actually claimed that.
No, he claims it. Yeah, no, he clearly claims it. There are a lot of.
I wrote it down.
Okay, keep.
He also claims to have 176 IQ.
No. I mean,
Okay. Cliff, do you want to address the Q question?
This is
Sure, sure, if
actually,
you want.
I had a question about
Yeah.
Q. I'm glad you spawned that. Suddenly, in September, out of nowhere, the people now claiming to be Q, and we know that's switched hands over and over again, but they're now claiming, oh yeah, secret space program, cool, UFOs, go for it, and right alongside with Wilcock and these people pumping up Q all of a sudden. Now, you have a very interesting perspective on this, showing that the language changed for whoever was
Correct.
running that thing. So it's a totally different group now.
Okay, and you have to understand that I do things on less traveled parts of the internet, so I know this area very well. Like all of the places that coders hang out, GitHub, Slack, and a bunch of these other areas, right?
Right.
Stack Overflow, where people discuss, debugging and these kind of weird sort of things. So I know 4chan. I've had a 4chan ID for, oh geez, I don't know how many years. And 4chan is really interesting because it's designed for anonymous graphic posts. And they provide you with this unique ID that is tied within their database through this algorithm that includes some level of encryption and thus obscuring of your IP, but it includes your IP address with a relationship with this, what's called a trip code. Okay, but it's an ID validator, it's a password. So in order to put a post up on 4chan, you have to provide this trip code. And so it's a little bit more than just logging in, because they don't want you to log into their system and be tied on it. The idea is, if you're going to be truly anonymous, it's just go and drop it, just hit it and get out, so there's very few IP trails to tie you to that actual post. Okay. And so this mechanism is designed for that, but nobody's going to use 4chan or 8chan for that matter. And let's just say that 8chan is kind of like a watered down version of 4chan, but nobody's going to use it without first doing things like, nobody's smart anyway, other things to obscure your IP address, like VPNs and so on. So there are extra steps you provide in dealing with 4chan because of the crowd you're involved with, right? Okay, so none of those. Okay, so when Q first appeared as of October 31 last year, there was a particular trip code involved that was the stamp of identity for that individual. That code was hacked between December and January, and this was at the time that Q was moved to 8chan.
Ah, yes.
Okay, it is during that period of time, during these 16 days, that the language changed. Prior to that, the nature of the language was such that if there was a group behind it, it was a single individual that was actually taking the group's ideas and typing them in and putting them in there, and was using their words for whatever kind of interpreting their fellows' words. I think it was a single individual that did all of the typing of the actual language there. Thereafter, it gets really muddied. So I haven't paid any attention to Q after the trip code was, because as far as I was concerned, they found him, they put a bullet in his head, and they took over the op.
Fascinating.
Okay, because because the language radically changed, and the stuff that Q was putting out suggested that there was some level of risk, right? As though someone would find him and put a bullet in his head. And I think that's exactly what happened. Thereafter, in the move, even before the move to 8chan, all of a sudden the extra screening that had been done on postings to 4chan for Q behind the trip code, the extra screening, all of it went away. This was guy just stomping around on 4chan like he didn't know what he was doing.
Wow. Amazing. And you make a really interesting point about this. My question, I guess I have a follow-up there, which is, with Q, the people who have it now, what are their motivations?
I don't answer why questions.
Yeah.
Okay, because I don't know intent.
Yeah.
They could just be LARPing because of the dopamine they get from fooling everybody.
I like it.
The other side of kind of like the shock of the new, right? There's a lot of things that trigger dopamine. And in fact, in my computer programming experience, you frequently are presented with the idea from marketing, well, you got to amp this thing up. We want to keep these people on this site longer. And by amping it up, you're actually involved with psychologists that can tell you, they come back and they present you with, as a programmer, with statistics for the test users, the dopamine levels that are projected to have been created against your UX design your user experience design so that you can tailor that user experience to produce more dopamine. And so it may be that these guys are hooked on their own LARP.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. Great point. Amazing stuff tonight. Cliff, thank you so much. Everyone, you're watching Dark Journalist. We've been deep on the Blue Chicken cult and the secret space program and the Corey Good doxing of people in the field.
That was, I'm going to say that that's most foul. And I'm being humorous and I'm being facetious. And I would be neither if I could be personally in front of these individuals.
Excellent point. Excellent point. And I think we all speak with one voice to say that it was disgraceful display, and it's just not. It's not going to stand. We have been using that hashtag to keep everybody online on Twitter in the same thread, which is hashtag no docs, DOXX. And I think that we all need to use that on this. As promised, we're going to keep the closest possible eye on this situation, and we'll have follow-up reports tomorrow night. We have the X series part 34, which is going deep on time capsules and the Georgia Guidestones. I can't wait. And Miss Olivia, you get the last word.
Everybody wants to know where they can find Clif.
I'm not telling. I got enough problems.
Right. The Blue Chicken cult really wants to know where to find Clif.
Yeah, but see, there's the thing. I mean, I would tell them if they would contact me directly. So here's an actual honest response to that question. If Corey Good or David Wilcock or Jason or Jordan Sather want to contact me, I'm open. They could probably find you and you could tell them my phone number.
Absolutely.
And I would be quite happy to discuss how to get out of this mess with them and provide them with some options that their thinking probably does not include at this point. And I think that Jordan Sather, it's a terrible thing to give unsolicited advice, but kid, get yourself into a martial arts dojo and sober up.
Sober up.
Yeah. That kratom is wicked. They call them weepies around here. Okay, you smoke or you chew the stuff long enough, and you get these weepy eye syndromes that can take years to clear up. It affects your vision. It affects your brain. It's just not good stuff.
Apparently affects your judgment when you go around doxing people too. Not fun. Not a fun
he may not have had any choice. He may have been told to do that by his bosses, right?
Yeah.
Because
very
someone put him where he's at, and he's beholden.
Excellent point, Cliff. Spoken like a true dojo yourself. By the way, Good, instead of sort of saying, well, things went too far and all the rest of it, he's doubling down. He said, I'm going to sue everybody in sight, and I'm going to sue you for slander. I'm going to sue this. But he's like, I can't decide who to sue first.
Hey,
Joe,
me.
Joe or Chanter or Cliff or whatever. But look, listen, I did the New Age Deep State series. Choose me. Okay?
You terrible bastard.
Corey, I know you're watching. It's this guy right here. Do you understand? It's got to be me. Choose me. I want the headline, Time Traveling Astronaut Sues Dark Journalist. And by the way, I'll put down real money that within 10 minutes of you entering that courtroom, they grab you for 28 days of observation. I absolutely guarantee it. So I'm looking forward to it. Please take a move, bust a move, as they say. And so, Olivia, fantastic questions tonight. I'm going to leave the last word with you.
Well, actually, I don't know anything about this, but Breach 123 wanted to ask about the Q money that just came on the scene.
Q money.
I don't know anything about that.
No.
Okay, that's going back into the cryptocurrencies, and we don't want to take that on at the end of a show.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. But Cliff,
Next time.
Yes, excellent point. I will say this, though, Cliff. We're going to have you back on after Thanksgiving. We're going to do a whole in-depth show on the real Sacred Space program and all the things around it and all the military implications and all the rest. I would love to do that with you. So thanks so much for coming on tonight. Really appreciate it. And thanks for the inside info from your insider, because I think that's a valuable insight into the whole situation.
It does frame things, indeed. And good luck to us all. It's going to be a most amazing year.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for your input on the situation, which I think, it's been a delicate situation. It's been a rowdy situation. There's so many factors to it, but you've stood strong against all the cult activity and all the gangland type activity. And we really appreciate it here at Dark Journalist.
It's Aikido. Get into the dojos, guy. Hey, you're not too old. You're not too old. Get out there and roll Brazilian jiu-jitsu. You'd be good at it. You got the frame.
I like the sound of it. Thanks so much, everyone. Thank you for being here. Tomorrow night, we're back with you at 7:00 with the X series, and we're looking forward to it. Miss Olivia, as usual, fantastic questions. Fantastic job. We had great people out there tonight. I saw Groovy Bean, a cult fan, was out there, and incredible Clif fans. God, Clif, they're missing you big time. So it's so great we had you on. Gaia Sophia and Nimza is out there. Fantastic. Mysterious Forces. We will all see you tomorrow night at 7 p.m. with the time capsule episode. That's one you don't want to miss. That's an X series part 34. Mark it on your calendar, and we'll see you there.
Okay, good night, everybody.
The only last question is, Miss Olivia, what's for dinner?
Oh, I think back to pizza.
No barbecue chicken?
Actually,
they walked right into that one.
Yeah, with some nice organic chicken on it. Nothing wrong with that.
I think it sounds like a good plan. Thank you, Clif, so much.
Thank you. And tell Olivia to call me anytime she needs to.
Awesome.
She had some things she wanted to discuss.
Thank
Absolutely.
you. Can't wait.
Miss Olivia. And we'll see you tomorrow night.